Greetings and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, January 25th, 2021, beginning at 6:30 p.m. Call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. A recognition of members present. Let the record reflect that all councilors are present, including City Administrator Cainrath. With that, we move to item 3, the Pledge of Allegiance. We invite the public to join the council in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flags are located behind City Administrator Cainrath. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for that. Moving on to item Item 4 under general, we have a recognition. And that is item A, to recognize Saco Centenarian Claire Mills Appleby. Claire Mills Appleby was born on January 28, 1921 in Howland, Maine. Her father worked for a paper company, and throughout her childhood, their family moved frequently from Milltown to Milltown in Maine, Vermont, and New York. She knew she wanted to be a nurse, and despite an attempted bribe of a piano from her father, she enrolled in nursing school. Claire's clinical studies brought her to New York, where she was living when World War II broke out. Nursing students weren't allowed to be married, but her parents persuaded the school to make an exception, and she married her high school sweetheart, Earl Appleby, on December 22nd, 1942 at the Riverside Church in New York City. After a brief honeymoon, Earl reported for active duty in the Navy, and Claire returned to her studies. She graduated in 1944 and moved to New London, Connecticut, where Earl was based. She worked in the polio ward for the local hospital until Earl's tour was completed in 1945. They moved to Burlington, Vermont, and while Earl completed his college education, their son Bruce was born. After Earl completed his studies, his career brought them to Massachusetts. They had a daughter, Candace, and Claire was an at-home mom for 13 years. She returned to work part-time nights in a local hospital until Bruce was in college and Candace was in high school, and then worked full-time at a rehab facility, becoming a nursing supervisor. Earl's career led them to Connecticut. Claire found employment at an extended care facility as a nursing supervisor, eventually becoming the director of nursing. She retired from that position, and she and Earl fulfilled their retirement dream of moving back to their beloved home state of Maine. They enjoyed life in their condo and were surprised when both of their children settled in the state as well. Earl passed away in 1993. Claire kept herself busy by being a grandmother, guppy, gardening, and enjoying visits with family and friends. She lived independently until the age of 97 and now resides at the Inn at Atlantic Heights. Her son lives in Southwest Harbor. Her daughter Candace and husband Dan live in Saco. Her granddaughter Alyssa, husband John, and great-grandchildren Haley and Joseph also live in Saco. Her granddaughter Kelsey lives in Florida with her husband Chris. Claire has been a source of pride and inspiration to her family and friends. She has always maintained a great sense of humor and credits her longevity to a healthy diet, regular exercise, and a daily cocktail at happy hour. Congratulations, Claire Mills Appleby. And now we will watch a short presentation of photos that were collected from the cane, the Centenarian cane presentation. What we're seeing is Ernie Merritt, who handmade the cane from wood right here in the state of Maine. This was something that was done with previous mayors, with Ernie making canes for members of the community that turned 100. So we thought it was an important concept to bring back, and Claire is the first first recipient of the cane in the last 4 years, or 2 years, sorry. You'll see from the photos, Claire was presented the cane by her grandson, Joseph. Thank you to the Appleby family for letting me be a part of that. And congratulations to Claire Mills Appleby for being the Centenarian, Centenarian here in Saco. With that, we arrive at item 5, committee correspondence to council. Is there any committee correspondence to council at this time? Councilor McPhail?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Saco Main Street is gearing up for 2021, and our design committee is looking for folks who are creative, imaginative, and who just want to make Saco Main Street a fun and beautiful place for our residents and visitors. The design committee is responsible for things like the holiday lighting, the Adirondacks on Main Street, the flower planters, and so much more. You can contact via the Saco Main Street Facebook or email sacomainstreet@gmail.com if anyone is interested in volunteering or trying to find out and learn more about the committee and would like to join.
Thank you, Councilor McPhail. Councilor Berman?
Yeah, I have 2 items from the Conservation Commission that they're seeking input from the council on, and I'm wondering if now is an appropriate time to ask. The first, these are both initiatives that started under Councilor Copeland, and they're wondering about guidance from council moving forward. The first is about a tree cutting ordinance. This will be modeled after neighboring communities. The general idea is to guide development and new construction about when and how to cut trees and provide some Conservation Commission oversight and guidance to the planning board on that process. Neighboring communities have ordinances that range from single family houses up through large developments, and they vary in that way. The second is a balloon release ordinance that might apply some sort of penalty or fee or fine to people that release over some number of balloons in one day. And the idea there would be to protect primarily sea life. It's bad for fishes and marine mammals when those balloons land somewhere. So they're seeking some discussion or input from council about whether we would like them to continue pursuing those ordinances.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. We will put that on a new business portion of an upcoming agenda.
Thank you.
Any further committee correspondence to council? Seeing no further committee correspondence to council, moving on to item 6 of the agenda, and that is public comment. City Administrator Kainrath, have we received any public comment for tonight's meeting?
I have none at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, open it up to members of the community who are participating via Zoom. We have a hand up. Okay. For anyone wishing to speak to the council, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9, and you'll be unmuted to speak to the council. Please remember to identify yourself with your name and your address, and then you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments to council. First up, we have an identifier as Margaret E. Mills. Margaret, you've been allowed to speak. Go ahead and unmute. State your name, address for the record, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Margaret E. Mills, Peg Mills. I live on 168 Simpson Road in Saco. And my very brief comment is about one of your last items on the agenda, H, which would be the Ecology School Contract Zone, MOA. And I would just like to bring up a couple of points that the councils may not know that might help them with their decision. So as an abutter of the ecology school, we are aware somewhat of their progress and their activities. We do not go on the property, but we're aware of comings and goings. We do realize that they have asked for because of financial hardship, they've asked for to be released from certain risk requirements on their contract zone. Two of them are not paying the $20,000 in lieu of taxes and not paying for a widening of the end of the Simpson Road to adjust for their additional vehicle traffic. And that's quite a bit of money. I'm concerned because I think they probably can afford $20,000. You may not be aware that they're not only on their 10 acres, the ecology school, or even on the 100 or so acres of the parcel at 184, but they've also purchased land as an LLC. They've purchased a house down the street. The tenants have told me that while on paper it's an LLC, they pay their rent to the ecology school. They also are occupying a building across the street owned by David Johnson for the Fog Trust, and they have tenants in there. I don't know who's collecting the rent there, but my understanding is that staff are living there. So it's not just inside the ecology school footprint. And they are receiving some income, and they're paying for staff, not just construction staff right now, but also educational staff now. And I would suggest that they can afford to not have this payment waived. And I will take your comments off the air. Thank you.
Thank you, Peg. Next up, we have identifier Inga Brown. Inga, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record.
Yes, hi, good evening. Inga Brown, 161 Simpson Road. I didn't know if council was going to allow public comment later in the meeting when we get to action item H, or if now is the time to bring forward my comments.
Now is the time to bring forward your comments.
Great. I believe that I hope most counselors did receive a letter that I sent. It was sent around 2 o'clock or so, so I understand if you might not have had a chance to review the letter. In the letter, I tried to bring forward my own concerns related to the MOA. I do think it's a good move forward, that you're considering deferment of some of that programming versus an all-out waiver. And, you know, as you recall, some of you might recall that last April, Finance Director Salas had presented the proposal to council regarding the development of a more robust pilot program to collect revenue from nonprofits that own property in the city of Saco. So I believe that the MOA is certainly a way forward for fairness and equity for all of our nonprofits. So I definitely support you voting in affirmation of that MOA. Many of you know that this is the city's losing had lost about between $14,000 and $17,000 from property tax when the Riverbend Farm property became a nonprofit. Certainly, I have tremendous empathy for all schools, the ecology school as well. Very difficult circumstances, and no one could possibly have foreseen these difficult times. I do think that the contract zone itself, sort of a forced partnership into perpetuity between Saco schools and the ecology school, is potentially vulnerable to other outside factors. And I think that down the road, this might be something that has to be looked at again. I do want to talk about reporting. I do feel that the deferment of $5,000 this year and maybe $5,000 next year over the next 8 years to get up to that $40,000. While I think that's a fine plan, I am concerned about the difficulty of potentially tracking that. And I would like to just bring forward the idea of a better reporting and accountability system that includes review by you, council, since this is related to a contract zone amendment, rather than Saco schools in isolation, simply sort of rubber stamping a simple report. And I would like to say more about the annual report. Some of you may have seen in your November 30th packet the chart that the ecology school presented with programs in sort of lumped categories. And I do think that more transparency on those programs is very reasonable. I'm a parent of a fifth grader at Burns School. My daughter has been there for the last 3 years. And I will say that none of the ecology school programming was ever lifted up in any direct way to parents. I was never really aware of when there might be programming. I understand that programming, of course, was postponed last spring. But this is programming for my daughter that I didn't even know was on the table to begin with. So one of the things what I'd like to say is that to have greater information and data from the chart, I think it'd be important for the chart to be able to be more verified and cross-referenced so that Saco students or teachers or principals could identify themselves in the data, such as 3 third grade classes at Burns School enjoyed X program or Y program. And this is just for greater transparency and accountability. I also have concerns, as Ms. Mills might have mentioned, that the turn lane on to Simpson Road from Buxton Road. This is another financial issue that should have been built and taken care of long before now. So I just want you to continue to be aware about this project and its progress. I think that sometimes the communication from city staff to the planning board is not as complete as it could be, and that certainly was the case with the turn lane. So in closing, I would just like to say that I think the MOA is a positive step forward. I think it's fair. I think it's equitable. And I would like some of the reporting from Saco schools to also be more detailed and to be shared with council, and a better tracking and reporting system on that front. So thank you for your time on that.
Thank you, Inga. Next up, we have identifier Jack Hughes. Jack, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Jack Hughes. We have a home at 7 Pearl Avenue in Saco. And I wondered if now was the time, since everybody's commenting on the agenda under new business, they're talking about the parcels of land that you're talking about, what we all need to do about that. And I had written a letter to Brian and talked with him last summer. And I've been actively talking with Dave Toomey, who is a neighbor of mine who's aware of the situation as well. And I just wanted to talk to the council and say, gee, this is something we'd be very interested in. There's a number of us that would like to do this. My own personal need is to take the one non-buildable parcel of land that I always thought was ours that I found out wasn't, and to purchase it so that at least the town is getting a tax revenue benefit from it. And it would give me the opportunity to maintain the property better, which I'm actually doing anyway, dragging sand in every spring. But I think that it's something that's very important to us, and I think that we would take care of it. There was a question raised about offering a right of way to the area, and certainly that's not anything that we'd object to. And pretty much everybody gets a right of way whenever they want over the end of the street. So I just wanted to know if there's anything that I could do that would be helpful to y'all to enhance any discussions about it.
Thank you for your comments, Jack. The council will be discussing that item later on this evening, hopefully, and it should may come up as an agenda item at a future council meeting for consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Any other comments for the city council? Any other public comments? Again, those wishing to speak to the council, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9 if you're using a cellular phone, and you'll be unmuted to speak to the council. Seeing no hands raised and nobody seeking recognition, moving on to item 7, approval of the minutes for January 11, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Minthorn, is there a second?
Second.
Councilor McPhail. Discussion on the minutes? Roll call vote on the minutes. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Moving to item 8, the consent agenda. The consent agenda approves of 4 items. Item A, a hardship forgiveness for medical patient. Item B, acceptance of market analysis and action plan. Item C, schedule for February council meetings. And item D, massage therapist license application. Amy Cross doing business as Soul Shine Co. Body Works. Is there any counselor who would like to take any item out before voting on the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as is?
So moved.
Councilor Minthorn, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Roll call vote on the consent agenda. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, everyone. We are up to item 9, action items. First up is item A, an annual audit review and acceptance. Councilor Berman.
Sure. Section 6.16 of the city charter requires that the city council provide for an independent annual audit of all city accounts. In the packets, you find 6 exhibits, a City of Saco CAFR, City of Saco SAS letter, City of Saco School Department financial statements, City of Saco Statement of Assurance, City of Saco Uniform Guidance, all dated 6/30/20, and the City Administrator's assessment of unassigned fund balance. Be it ordered that the City Council accept the annual audit as presented by the city's auditor and in the accompanying financial statements, and I move to approve that order.
Is there a second?
Second.
Item's been motioned by Councilor Berman, second by Councilor Minthorn. At this time, I'd like to invite Finance Director Glenna Salas to provide a presentation to the City Council on the items that are here before you tonight. Finance Director Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As in the past, our city auditor, Parker, has been invited to come in and present the city's audit. So he has a presentation that he's going to share with everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glennis. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm going to pull up my slides through share screen here. So you should be able to see a full picture of the slide if it's on the right screen.
We can see your screen.
Great, thank you. All right, as Glennis mentioned, my name is Parker Madden. I am the manager on the City of Saco's audit for FY 2020. This is about my 4th year being on this audit. And typically, audit presentation rotates between myself and Roger. For those that were here last year, Roger probably did the presentation. This year, I'll be doing the presentation. Getting down into the various reports that we issue. So the way that I break down this presentation, this very first slide that you all are looking at right now, this is everything that we as auditors are producing. We're producing an opinion on your financial statements, a report on your internal control, as well as a report on your federal compliance under uniform guidance. It's important to remember that management actually prepares basically and takes responsible for basically everything else you see. All of the CAFR is prepared by management, as well as all of the numbers within the CAFR. There's no such thing as separate audit numbers from what's in your system versus what's in the CAFR. That's all the same, as well as anytime I produce a journal entry, Glennis or Jason is actually reviewing and approving those to allow them to take responsibility. My responsibility as your auditor is to form an opinion on those financial statements, and I'm going to go over those results right here on this first slide. For FY 2020, the city received an unmodified opinion on its financial statements. So this means a clean opinion. The financial statements are materially accurate in accordance with GAAP. The 2020 audit opinion was dated December 23rd, 2020, with fieldwork ending on October 23rd. That's roughly a 60-day turnaround between the last day of fieldwork and issuing financial statements. And being 60 days, that's right in the zone where we'd want a government of your size to be. This just shows that management, for one, was very well prepared with their financial statements. They were given to us in a very timely manner, as well as providing us with information to allow us to complete our audit was given to us in a timely manner. For FY 2020, there were 2 audit adjustments that were accepted and posted by management, one for the city and one for the school department. And the reason why I bring it up, that's kind of an important concept as far as pre-audit and post-audit numbers. So why is that an important concept? It is because the less adjustments that we're providing to management as a result of our audit, it allows for you as the council to have more reliable information throughout the year. If we're coming through and we're proposing lots and lots of adjustments and the numbers are materially changing, no, that'd be a little more alarming for you. However, being the fact that we had 2 total adjustments on this job, you can rely on the fact that the information that Glennis is presenting to the council and Jason is presenting to the school board throughout the year is accurate and can be relied upon. In FY 2019, the city received the certificate of award for the CAFR again. That's always a look back 1 year behind. So in FY 2020, we present the CAFR award for 2019 within the CAFR. And based on the small amount of comments from the reviewers, I anticipate that you will also receive the award in FY 2020 as well. The second audit report that we issue is a report required by government auditing standards. This is a report on your internal control system over financial reporting, as well as the city meeting laws and regulations. We are happy to report the city received neither a material weakness nor significant deficiency related to its controls. So basically what this is saying that it is more than likely that your internal control system is detecting and correcting material misstatements in a timely manner. Essentially, you're not relying on the auditor as part of your control system is really what that's getting at. And that's an important item to have. We did have one compliance finding. So this is a compliance finding related to a laws and regulation, specifically on the school department. As many of you may be aware, the school department, as required by state statute, cannot exceed their total budget authority in a given year. In FY 2020, the school department did actually exceed total budgeted expenditures, and that produces a laws and regulation finding. Just to give a little background on this, back in 2019, in fiscal year 2019, when the 2020 budget was being put together, it was proposed for the school department to bring down expenditures by roughly $1 million. And really the intent here was that the school department was actually carrying some fund balance that needed to be used up. Instead of going through and approving a use of fund balance of that amount, expenditures were just cut. Whenever this occurs, going into the year, knowing that your budget is actually higher than where you're going to be spending, it's no surprise that they'll exceed their budgeted authority. We've talked at this at length with management as well as with the council, and we do not feel that this error will reoccur. Essentially, what we'd like to see in the future is if the school department is carrying fund balance and the intention is to offset the tax effects of school department budget increases, that a use of fund balance, a budgeted revenue is placed into the budget to keep it in balance and expenditures stay at the same level. This will achieve the intention of using down fund balance without undercutting the expenditures. We did have two minor management letter comments, and one being related to controls at Saco Middle School. Pretty minor item here. When we're going through receipts for the Saco Middle School, we found that 5 of the 27 receipts we reviewed were part of deposits where the funds were held in excess of 10 business days. Anytime that any kind of office, whether it be the school or its city, is holding funds internally for 10 business days or essentially 2 weeks, just the risk of fraud or really misplacement of the funds greatly increases. So what we suggest to management is to reinforce with the middle school that strong internal control suggests that deposits are made within 10 business days. We anticipate that this issue should be corrected in FY 21. The other management letter comment we had in FY 2020 is related to future GASBs. And this is just to keep management alert of what's coming down the pipeline. As of June 30, 2021, so the fiscal year you're in right now, that's closing in June, GASB 84 will become applicable. And really the major change here is that GASB is no longer going to be considering student activity funds to be fiduciary in nature. This is due to some technical reading of, or technical change in definition of fiduciary under GASB's eyes. Basically, they believe because activity advisors provide influence on the use of the funds, that the students aren't truly in control of the activity funds, which is true. There's no activity fund in the state of Maine where a student is completely in control. We have advisors to ensure that internal controls are being followed. As a result, the activity funds will be moved to special revenue category. This will not actually create a major change for your financial statements. It's essentially going from one classification of fund type to a different classification of fund type. And there'll be a restatement of beginning fund balance as a result. I will assist management in implementing. I've done this for a number of communities that early implemented. and the change is not overly significant. The larger, more significant GASB that's coming down is GASB 87 related to leases. And that'll be applicable June 30, 2022. The reason why I bring this up is it's such a significant change on really what we consider to be operating leases. These are month-to-month leases, typically space rentals. And it's not included in your capital leasing. Generally, those rules are going to stay the same. It's really what they're doing is they're taking operating leases, which were typically just presented in your P&L, and including a balance sheet item. So that leases in excess of 1 year will actually result in some amortization. We will work with management through the rest of this fiscal year as well as the next fiscal year. Really, the big thing at first will be accumulating all of the operating leases and from there sorting them out and helping management with the new recognition. And then the final auditor report that we issued in 2020 is report required by uniform guidance. This is your federal compliance audit. The reason why we do that is the city spends in excess of $750,000 a year in federal expenditures. In 2020, the city actually expended $2.1 million. A large share of this is actually on the school side. And as you can tell, our testing relates to that. The special education cluster, or the federally supported portion of special education, represent about $846,000 of the $2.1 million, and was the largest program, and therefore represented our major program for testing. We are happy to report that there were no findings or control deficiencies related to your special education cluster. It's important to notate going into FY21, you should expect to see quite an increase in your federal expenditures related to CARES Act, as well as other federal stimulus packages that come through. And there will be an effect on city and school. If the city actually gets up to any kind of grant over $750,000, it'll automatically become major. And that's due to the federal rotation requirements. So it's perfectly reasonable to expect there to be 2 federal programs in FY 2020, where traditionally we've been able to get by with 1. All right, and that is all of the auditor's reports that we issue. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go through some slides. And really the primary purpose here is to kind of just break down or highlight some information that is presented in your CAFR and just kind of bring light of it, as some of this stuff's pretty easy to gloss over, just due to the pure size and bulk of the information within a CAFR. This first slide here is your city general fund balance comparative from 2016 to through 2020. Overall, fund balance decreased by about $780,000 from FY19 to 2020. And we'll get into the real details on that in your budget to actual slides upcoming. Now, for FY 2020, the city is reporting 3 categories of general fund balance. Your unassigned, probably the one that everyone's most familiar with here. This is available for future appropriation, no internal or external restrictions being carried. Assigned, your assigned fund balance is basically fund balance where there's planned expenditures. However, these expenditures may not actually occur until after year end in subsequent periods. Therefore, assigning it in FY 2020, knowing that in possibly 21, the amounts will come down. And this is an important topic this year, because as you can tell, in 2019, assigned was about $2.2 million. And then at the end of FY 2020, it's right around $500,000. It's a pretty significant decrease. However, it's very easily explained. In FY 2020, a capital project, city capital project fund was established in order to track and record the capital activity of what was considered assigned for capital in the general fund separately into its own fund. This can be found, this new fund, on Exhibit D2 of your CAFR. And why management is doing this, this, for one, is going to provide much clearer reporting on the activity within your capital projects. When it's inside your general fund, you're essentially looking at a number at year end, However, being a fund balance category, you actually don't gain that extra knowledge of what the ins and the outs were for the year. By segregating it out into its own fund, that'll be clearly visible moving forward. Now, the $500,000 that remains in there is open POs, essentially encumbrances that are being carried into FY21. And we should see this number stabilize around $500,000, depending on where management ends with their open POs moving forward. And then finally, you have a non-spendable category of $2,700. This represents prepaid expenditures. All non-spendable means is that there's assets on your balance sheet that will not be easily converted to cash. Prepaid expenditure, when that asset comes down, you'll actually result in expenditures. And you compare that to a receivable. When a receivable comes down, you're actually collecting cash. That's kind of the difference between spendable and non-spendable. Next slide represents the city's general fund revenues, budget versus actual. Overall, revenues came in about $566,000 less than was anticipated. And really your main drivers here are that within the FY 2020 budget, there was a utilization of surplus of $1.1 million and planned carryover of assigned fund balances of $2.2 million. Basically what these items are is these are budget balancing items where the fund balance is already there. We do not need to collect additional tax revenues in order to make these expenditures. So therefore, you don't actually have an offsetting revenue. You have a offsetting budgeted revenue that just will not materialize. As such, it allows you to use down that fund balance. Now, I'm going to go over some of the larger variances here. Taxes came in about $1.9 million higher than anticipated. Two drivers here is excise came in about $448,000 higher than was anticipated, and real and personal property is really driving the rest of that. License and permits exceeded budget by $200,000. This is due to higher than anticipated building permit revenue, which is just a sign of a strong economy as well as strong, a lot of building activity during quarantine. Your intergovernmental revenues came in about $400,000 higher than anticipated. This is driven by state revenue sharing coming in about $366,000 higher than anticipated, as well as within your general fund. Federal assistance isn't a budgeted category. That's because within federal assistance, these are usually reimbursement grants, which means that as the funds are expended, you're being reimbursed to offset that. So typically that's a non-budgeted category, and that drove in another $123,000 in FY 2020. And then finally, your interest earnings came in about $115,000, $116,000 higher than anticipated. Two main drivers here. You have conservative budgeting, and as well as strong Q3 performance of the repo, which is driven by changes in interest rates at the Fed level. This next slide represents your general fund expenditures, budget versus actual. It's important to remember for those that are interpreting this, that on this graph, as with revenues, brackets mean under budget, and then non-brackets mean over budget. Overall, the general fund came in about $214,000 over budget from what was originally budget, or from what was the final budget came out to. And the real driver there is your transfers to other funds. There was quite a few transfers that occurred after the budget was completed. These include items to close out funds outside of the general fund, as well as cover negative fund balances. Another driver in here, there was a there was actually a budgeted transfer that was budgeted in a department line as opposed to the transfer line. And then finally, and really the largest driver here is your TIF values came in slightly higher than was anticipated. All of your TIF revenues are transferred out of the general fund and into their own funds. So that's always going to cause a budget variance as well. Department-wise, the city was quite a bit under budget, about $818,000. And we're going to go over some of those main drivers. General government came in about $286,000 under budget. This driven by open positions, as well as employee turnover. Employee turnover is always going to cause budget coming in under. That's just because newer employees will be replaced, which come in lower on the scale, as well as younger employees typically tend to select cheaper benefits than employees later in their career. Public safety came in $156,000 under budget. Open positions again, and this was specifically at the police department. Some of these were open throughout the entire fiscal year. Public works came in about $476,000 under budget, and this is due to a reduced workload as a result of COVID-19. This is a trend that you can be seen across any government in the state of Maine. As soon as the shutdown occurred in March, that has a significant effect on public works and their ability to get the spring projects completed. And as such, you'll see a reduction in expenditures. And then finally, unclassified actually came in over budget by about $111,000. Now, unclassified includes your fringe benefits. Fringe benefits came in slightly over budget due to underestimating the effect that overtime would have on fringe benefits, as well as your contingency lines in here as well. Within the contingency, you have your accounts receivable write-offs as well as abatements. Both items coming in higher than what was anticipated. Now we're going to be switching gears. These next 3 slides are going to be really focused on the school department. So a little slice out of the city, specifically for the school's general fund. Most notable observation on this graph is that in 2019, the school department was reporting a positive fund balance of about $1.1 million, $1.2 million. And in 2020, they're about $1 million in the deficit. This is a result of a $2.1 million loss or expenditures exceeding revenues in FY 2020. A portion of this was actually planned as a result of the council reducing city expenditures as discussed earlier, as well as some budget variances that increased the effect as well. As mentioned in the previous slide, both expenditures came in over budget and revenues came in less than anticipated. And as you can tell here, all the way down at the bottom, total revenues as well as other financing sources came in about $666,000 less than anticipated. Primary driver here is your medical reimbursements. Within your medical reimbursements, this is your main care billing. COVID-19 shutdown actually affected your main care billing by about $250,000. And another driver within this number, overall budget was overly optimistic by another $500,000. The two of those coming together make up about the entire $700,000 that you see. And then secondly, the school department did actually have a revenue come in higher than anticipated. This is your state subsidy, came in about $80,000 over what was anticipated. And really these two items offsetting each other come to about the $666,000. All the other revenue variances are minor and essentially net out. This next slide is the general fund expenditures for the school department budget versus actual. As far as from an auditor's perspective, the most important item on here is that total expenditures came in $1.4 million higher than was budgeted for. As I mentioned, this creates a laws and regulation issue, which is why I bring that up. Now let's get into some of the real large drivers that's really pushing that $1.4 million. First item on here is your regular instruction. It actually came in under budget by about $333,000. Really, the real driver here is that student enrollment came in less than anticipated for private school. As anyone that sat on the council in the past, this number is over and under budget annually. There's quite a bit of swing in that, depending on the enrollment. Probably the largest driver of the school department going over budget is within the special education. Came in about $1.3 million higher than was anticipated. Main drivers here is that the school needed additional staff to keep up with student-teacher ratios. So really what's going on there is as your student population, the needs of the student population changes, within special education, that can greatly affect the amount of expenditures or the cost of special education. And then there was a second item in here, contracted services for psych came in quite a bit over budget. The school department had a position open all year where it was not filled. And as a result, that position was replaced with contracted services, which greatly drives the cost of providing that service up. Student and staff support came in about $108,000 higher than anticipated. Really, this is primarily driven by the fact that of budget cuts throughout the student and staff support lines. System administration came in about $300,000 higher than anticipated. Once again, budget cuts are a primary driver here, as well as this is where the legal expense occurs. FY 2020 was an abnormally high legal expenditure year for the school department. And based on the legal letter, that was resolved subsequent to year end, the legal issue that was persistent. So we should not anticipate to see such a large amount of legal going into 2021. The final driver of the budget variances on here, transportation actually came in under budget, about $150,000 under what was anticipated. And this savings was a result of the COVID-19 shutdown that reduced your maintenance costs. The 2020 shutdown reduced operating costs, as well as the fact that the school department has been upgrading the fleet, and as a result, maintenance costs have been coming down as well. All right, we're going to be jumping back into talking about town and school together for the rest of the slides. Now, this first slide on here, this is your unassigned fund balance on June 30 as a percent of FY 2020 budget. This is how we at RKO look at it, which is slightly different than how the city looks at it. I believe the city is current unassigned over future budget, the next period's budget. We have always done it this way. And the reason why we present it this way is so that it's comparable across all clients. And as you'll see, we have a comparability slide coming up. So the most notable item on here that I want to point out is that if you look from 2016 through 2020, your unassigned as a percent of fund balance has been steadily increasing. This has been an objective of management through budget process. And as you can see, over the past 5 years has really been paying off. Really, the number that is, in my opinion, most important is taking the city and school general fund together. That being the fact of the school department actually has a deficit. So you really don't want to try to get rid of that deficit, you want to really include that in your unassigned as well, as the school department is a department of the city. And that number came into about 15.45% in FY 2020. A little decrease from 2019. 2019 was at about 18%. But as I mentioned earlier, the school department had artificially high fund balance in 2019, and it was all planned to be used up in 2020. So really looking at that longer term, coming from 2016 at 11.45 up to 15.45 in 2020, the school department and city together's unassigned fund balance is really strengthening. This next slide presents the city's general fund team, the two largest categories of assigned and unassigned together, and then putting them out over the last 10 years. Most notably, overall fund balance has increased from 2011 up to 2020 quite significantly. So that's a very important item. It allows for the city to be much more prepared for emergency events that come. And as I mentioned earlier, between 2019 and 2020, you'll notice your assigned drop pretty significantly. And this is as a result of moving that capital out to its own fund. All right, here's the comparatives. The communities that we selected for FY 2020 include City of Augusta, City of Biddeford, the town of Gorham, and City of Saco. Probably the closest comparably wise structure, which is why these were selected. And you can tell that your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of budget falls right in line with Augusta, Biddeford, and Saco. Gorham's really the outlier there, coming in at about 20% as opposed to, the 15 to 13% range. And really what's going on there is that the town of Gorham, as a result of COVID-19 shutdown, the school saw very significant savings within their budget. So that really drove up the school's unassigned fund balance. And as a result, drove up their percentage. But as you can tell, outside of Gorham, City of Saco is very comparable to the other municipalities presented here. And the only item of note between 19 and 20 is to notice that the Saco was high at 18.14, now coming back in line at 15.45. That's the school department's deficit kicking in and driving that down just a little bit. Now, this is a pretty interesting graph here. What this represents is the lighter blue is how much of your property tax was collected within the fiscal year that it was assessed. And then the darker blue represents how much of that has been collected to date up to June 30, 2020. Not a whole lot actually to talk about here. The year collected within fiscal year in 2011 was about 96.48, in 2020 coming in at 97.41. That's very comparable within a percentage point over the last 10 years. As we know, 2011, the economy was pretty well recovered, and we've been in that point for the last 10 years. So this is just a sign of a pretty strong economy over a 10-year period. As the economy slows down, if that does occur, you'll see that collections in fiscal year slowly start to come down. And an important notation on here as well is you're almost recovering 100% of your property taxes within 1 year after. So 2019 was 97% in that year. Up to now, they've collected 99.20. So your collection rate is exceptionally high. And as I mentioned, this is just a sign of strong local economy. Now this graph is pretty interesting. I would say it's not overly comparable to many of my governments as of late. This is your property tax rate over the last 10 years. Most notably, since about 2013, your property tax rate has been essentially flat, 18.3 up to 19.38, and it actually was completely flat 2018 through 2020. This is a sign to me that it has been management's effort to keep expenditures comparable to prior year, as well as utilizing fund balance in a proper manner where they're actually able to offset future tax increases through the budget process. Probably the most notable item on here is that if you look at 2012, the city was running a rate of 14.42. And then in 2013, that jumped to 18.3. That's probably your most notable item on here. And in 2013, there was a large spike in the education assessment, as well as a 7% reduction in values. And as we know, as values go down, tax rate must come up. And that kind of works in the reverse of a reval. When valuations subsequently go up, mill rates come back down. However, as you can tell, you've been very steady since 2013 in your tax rate. Okay, what we're going to do here is, this is your general fund expenditure distribution for 2020 and 2019. And we're going to be talking about these at the same time. Reason being, it's just kind of easier to talk about the pies as one graph rather than as two. Basically, what I'm looking for here is when I go through these pie charts, is I'm looking to see, are the departments basically filling out roughly the same size of the pie as they did the year before? What this does is this indicates changes in budgeting process, as well as emergency purchases that may occur. Maybe if you see public safety growing a lot between a 1 year period as its percent of total, we'd really want to dive down and figure out why that's occurring. You'll notice that going through these, the 2020 and 2019, all of your departments were pretty comparable. I think the largest mover was education, was 50.81% 2015 and about 53% in 2020. So that's really what's going to be the focus of our discussion here. And really what's going on is that, as many of you may be aware, the cost of education far outpaces the cost increases within the other departments of the city. This is a trend across every municipality. As the state continues to adjust items such as EPS formula, and that affects negatively towards our governments, the effect on our education continues to increase. And the fact that the education expenditures outpace the other departments within the city, you see that piece of the pie growing 3% between the 2 years. And then finally, your capital projects actually came down almost a full percent from 2019 through 2020. And this is a matter of moving capital projects to a single fund outside of the general fund. This next slide represents the city's long-term debt as well as the capital leases. You'll notice when going through the CAFR that capital leases in 2020 has been changed to finance purchases. This is a minor terminology change that was given to us by GASB. And I just want to leave at the top capital lease as the header, just so this first year people can kind of get comfortable that capital lease is finance purchase. It's one and the same. Most notable changes on here is you'll notice that in 2019, the city was carrying about $20 million bonded debt. That dropped quite significantly to about 18.6 in 2020. The city experienced a pretty favorable refi of 2010 bonds, and this considerably dropped down the amount of bonded debt, as well as the fact that regular principal payments are bringing you down as well. Another notable mover, financed purchases, about $3.3 million in FY19, about $3.2 million in FY20. The city issued about 4 new finance purchase lease agreements. The school department had one for refinancing, actually a 2019 lease, as well as the school department leased 2 buses and 4 vans. And then the city leased an ambulance as well as an equipment leasing package that included a dump truck, forestry truck, skid steer, a mower, and a pickup. These new leases were offset by principal payments for the year. And the other 2 categories on here is your net pension liability or OPEB liabilities. These things are probably the biggest movers within your debt categories or your long-term debt. And that being the fact they're driven by actuarial studies and actuarial assumptions. And as assumptions change, as well as the pension liability is really invested in the stock market. So stock market can have quite an effect on your liability as well. But as you can tell, every year this thing is up and down. Both of these are up and down yearly. And that's as the actuaries tweak their assumptions. And really what the city needs to focus on with their net pension liabilities as well as their OPEB is just ensuring that they understand the policies that are driving them as opposed to necessarily the actual liability figure, because these liabilities are theoretical in the fact that no cash check can be written to remove these liabilities. So really focusing on the liability amount is not necessarily the most important factor here. It's really focusing on the drivers, the policies that management establishes that create the liabilities. This next slide is debt per capita. As you can tell, 2018 through 2020, it's been slightly coming down. This is driven by the fact that 2018 was the last large bonding package. 2018 included the bonds for the PW building moving. And since then, the city has refunded or refinanced 2010 bonds and not issued new bonds. As such, in that 3-year time period, your debt per capita has been coming down. And we're going to jump right to the next slide because really the most important item on debt per capita is looking at other communities. We found that about $2,000 debt per capita is about average for most of our clients. And as you can see, the city of Saco coming in about $1,000 debt per capita is actually a very good number. It shows that the city is really monitoring their bonded debt and issuing bonded debt as needed and really staying below those other communities of Augusta, Biddeford, and Gorham. At this point, I'd just like to open up questions on slides that came up as I was going through.
Thank you, Parker, for that presentation. Any questions from the council? Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Parker, thank you for your presentation. Definitely helps us to get back on track and see where the city is. I did have one concern when you brought up I may be misphrasing this, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a violation or a compliance issue with the laws and regulations of overspending. My question to you is, in context, is what liabilities or concerns should council be aware of this overspending? one, is it like a slap on the hand? Is it just a note that goes in a record, or can this build up to more significant concerns over several time periods, fiscal years, etc.?
Thank you for that question. That's an excellent question. This is what I consider to be a reporting finding. So the state is not going to be coming down on the Saco School Department as a result of this. It's similar to being over 3% fund balance state statute. Not that that's something that the school department is currently worried about. Basically, I think that the state would be more concerned if they saw this every year for a 10-year period. However, we at RKO have not seen financial effects as a result of this state statute. So really what we'd want to see is just going forward that this thing is cleared up. But as far as findings go, this is pretty much a paper finding, and we don't anticipate that the state is going to have repercussions as a result.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Parker, quick question. About 3 or 4 slides back into the deck, you mentioned a reevaluation. I know we're looking at possibly starting a reeval in the next few months later in the year. What would you anticipate might be the outcome of that, and will it be to our advantage, or is it something where we maybe, given all the other challenges we have right now with COVID and somewhat budget uncertainties at the state level, maybe it should be postponed another year?
Well, what I see the outcome to be is I would anticipate that property values have risen significantly since your last revaluation. As a result, you will see, if that is true, you'll see the mill rate will be reduced. However, the one thing that's important to remember in revaluations is that doesn't necessarily result in lower tax bills. Because the city's expenditure level is not going to go down as a result of a revaluation. Really what it does, or why many communities do it, is when they start to see their mill rate spiking, getting into the 20s, they do this as a result to provide an opportunity for that mill rate to come down. But as far as tax savings, I would not anticipate individual tax savings as a result of a revaluation.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Parker from the City Council? Parker, I just had 1 or 2 questions, rather. You talked about when you were comparing us to other communities, you talked about how we do a different formula when it comes to percentage of budget over compared to other communities. So, and you do it the way that makes it more comparable to other communities. Should we be adopting that practice of, or does it matter in the auditing world? Because we've gotten community complaints from some community members who don't like the approach that the city is taking. So I guess that's one question, is should we be looking at a different way that's more in line with other communities in how you get that breakdown? And if you understand what I'm asking.
Oh, that's a great question. So there may have been a little misinterpretation there. I think that using unassigned as a percent of future budget is the most common internal method of doing so. What I was saying is that RKO, we use unassigned as a percent of current budget. And the reason for doing that is we can easily, through our audits, we know for sure when we get done the audit what the unassigned is for our clients, and we know what that year's budgeted expenditures were as a result. If we started looking to future budget as a result of unassigned, it would just increase the risk of error on our end as far as misreporting those numbers. So we found to simplify, when presenting comparables, we're going to present unassigned as a percent of current budget.
Thank you for that. And then the other question I had is, you talked about some of the different departments being lower than previous years. Could that be because of the shifting of some of the funding to our TIF districts, such as when you shifted salaries of certain employees to TIF districts, or when you shifted certain payments to TIF districts rather than paying them out of the general fund, which is why that pie chart is maybe different than it has been in previous years, because you're utilizing those TIF dollars rather than hitting the general fund.
Yes, and that's an important concept there, because budgetary wise, you probably won't notice that savings, because you're going to build the budget with the anticipation of moving expenditures outside of the general fund. But when looking at total from year to year, yes, when your TIF fund is absorbing an allocation of administrator's salary or economic development employee's salary, and that's no longer reporting your general fund, there is significant savings as a result in the general fund department categories. And as you mentioned, it can cause comparability between reporting years. That's a very safe assumption there.
Thank you, Parker. I have no further questions. Any further questions for Parker from the council? Parker, any last words?
If there are no other questions, I just want to take a moment to thank the council for having us serve for another year. It's a great pleasure of RKO serving this city of Saco, as well as Saco School Department. And then I'd also like to send a thank you out to Glennis and Jason. To say I'm a thorn in their side is probably an understatement. I demand a lot. Glennis's job doesn't slow down just because I'm there bugging her. And same thing with Jason. They're both very receptive to meeting deadlines and getting me everything that I asked for in a timely manner. So I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, Parker. Finance Director Salas, anything to add in on this matter?
I have nothing to add, but I'd just like to thank Parker for taking time this evening for a very thoughtful presentation. And if you, as you're reviewing the annual financial reports, have any further questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm sure Parker will be happy to answer them as well.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? Council, at this time, there's a motion on the floor made by Councilor Berman, second by Councilor Minthorn, to approve the annual audit review. And any discussion on that? Seeing no discussion, a roll call vote to approve or accept the annual audit review. Councilor Archer?
I'm glad to hear the fiscal health is positive, and yes.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everybody. We move on to item B, which is a joint meeting with the school board. If you'll bear with us while we promote school board members to panelists. Welcome School Board Member Shea, School Board Member Preble, School Board Member Richard, School Board Member LaFortune, School Board Member Tardif, School Board Member Truman, and School Board Member Johnston. Thank you for joining us this evening for a joint meeting with the City Council. We have 4 items under the joint meeting with the school board, and that is item 1 is an update on city financials. Finance Director Salas, do you want to take us through a brief overview?
Absolutely. So I'm going to go through the memo, which is on page 272. So after all the audited financials in your packet. And as I have the last couple of budget updates, I'll just be reading through the main bullet points. So this is a budget review for fiscal year 2021 through the second quarter, or December of 2020. This report does include the final audited unassigned fund balance of $9,016,689 as of June 30th, 2020, which is 14.67% of the fiscal year 2021 approved budget. Through the second quarter, the city of Saco has a net operating income of $2.3 million. Expenses are tracking right on target. Revenues are tracking a little ahead, 3% ahead. A few departments, and I didn't want to get into each and every one of them, but there are a few departments ranging between 1% and 5% over budget: assessing, finance, fire, and planning and economic development. This overage is largely attributable to the timing of the December 31st, 2020 payroll, which was originally forecasted to occur on January 1st, 2021. But due to the holiday, we pulled that back 1 day. Okay, digging into some specific expenses. Capital projects is 19% ahead of forecast. This budget is tracking ahead of forecast because of an encumbrance for the new fire truck. The encumbrance will be cleared upon delivery and payment from our lease escrow. We will not be over budget. Code enforcement is 10% ahead of budget. So this department's still over, but it's coming down. Thanks to several weeks of an open position. This department is not tracking as far ahead of budget as previously anticipated. Contingency is 159% ahead of forecast. So there's a couple of things going on in contingency. Talk a little bit about that. The first item is tax abatements. So tax abatements are classified under contingency. They were initially budgeted for $70,000, but have come in at $191,480 through December. I had a conversation with the city assessor. There are a couple of factors that have contributed to this. Primarily, the issue is related to applications for Betty. The state moved the deadline a couple of times because of COVID-19 concerns. So some of those applications weren't actually processed until after commitment. The city assessor anticipates that the state will reimburse the city about 50% of the additional abatements. And then we, finance and assessing, have agreed together to collaborate on establishing what this budget will look like from year to year so that it's closer to what the assessor anticipates. The second major item is a write-off on the accounts receivable balance of $51,474. As part of the new quarterly reconciliation process in accounts receivable, it was identified that the process used to close out planning escrow accounts was double reporting revenues. This means that last year's planning revenues, which were reported at $126,541, were actually $75,067, which was right about in line with what we had budgeted. Unfortunately, this finding came too late to adjust our prior year financials, so the adjustment has had to happen in fiscal year 2021. I know this is a big number, so I wanted to just kind of talk through what's going on here. The first question that might pop into someone's head: did the city spend $51,000 out of contingency? The answer is no. The city has not laid out any actual cash for this adjustment. Rather, this is an adjustment down of the asset accounts receivable, which is on the city's balance sheet. Another question someone might be asking, did the city lose money? Nope. The higher accounts receivable just made our unassigned fund balance look higher than it was in fiscal year 2020. With this adjustment, our unassigned fund balance is now more accurate. Last question, most importantly, will this happen again? No, the finance department, specifically myself and the city's tax collector, who also manages our accounts receivable, have worked together to understand what the issue was, and we're creating an accounts receivable manual that will detail the proper way to configure and close out accounts receivable accounts. This will include the correct charge codes to use in Munis. Okay, moving on, federal assistance. There's a credit balance right now of $38,452. This reflects grant revenue related to the CARES Act funding. So Parker did touch a little bit on that in his presentation. We did receive some significant federal government through the state of Maine to help to assist the city with COVID-19 expenses. A grant policy has been prepared by finance and submitted to senior staff to review, and that's going to kind of clean up some of the reporting on this, because right now we're actually reporting grant revenue in an expense account and grant expenses in a revenue account. It's on my radar. It's something that will be fixed in the next few weeks. Fringe benefits is tracking 19% behind forecast. Several benefits payments were paid in January rather than December. So this is back in line as of January. Human resources also 19% behind forecast. Several initiatives are now under progress thanks to the temporary change in structure. Brian's touched on this. Salary study and training, some other initiatives are now underway, but the expenses just haven't come in yet. Parks and Recreation is 21% behind forecast. This department has had to put many recreation programs on hold or restructure their recreation programs. The savings in cost is offset by lower than forecasted revenues. And then finally, the solicitor. This item is tracking 37% ahead of forecast. We're still under budget for the full year amount, but we are tracking ahead. We still have about $50,000 in this line. If the city is very careful in its use of legal services, we should be okay through the rest of the year. Of course, it's hard to predict what will happen, but just being very cautious about this line, we should be okay. Are there any questions on the expenditure side? Okay, moving over to revenues. If you're looking at the tables in the packet that's on the next page. Rental income is 57% behind forecast. We did have an issue where the first quarter rental bills were issued prior year. So this line's going to come more, this item will be, sort of underperforming for the rest of the year, but it'll be closer. And I have worked with the accounts receivable department on how to manage rental income. Code enforcement is 23% ahead of forecast. So code enforcement continues to have really strong demand on the department. The surplus of revenues more than compensates for the surplus of expenses in this department. Federal assistance, we have a credit balance here of $128,000, which reflects grant expenses related to CARES Act funding. We will be looking to fix this item a little bit after the new grant policy is approved. It's coming in the next couple of weeks. Finance revenues are 46% ahead of forecast. This has to do with the delay in lien filing. The state delayed the deadline for lien filings by, I believe it was 45 days. So that kind of shifted some interest income into fiscal year 2021. Interest earnings are 89% behind forecast. So interest earnings, strong performer in 2020. The performance has come down basically 90%. Interest rates have really cratered. I've rewritten the investment policy for the city. It's something else the council will be receiving in the next few weeks. And then that will act as a kickoff to explore options for improving our interest earnings on our unassigned fund balance. Parks and Rec revenue is 77% behind forecast. The loss of revenue, again, offset by lower than budgeted expenses. Expenses are behind $211,000. while revenues are behind 351,000. Planning and economic development revenues, 56% behind forecast. Revenues were probably a little too high. It wasn't something that we focused on when we were evaluating revenues for fiscal year 2020, because overall, planning and economic development is about 75 to 100,000 a year. This isn't something that's going to have a material impact on our performance, but it is slow, and it's probably going to be slow through the rest of this year. I apologize, this is a typo. It's policy revenues. It should be police revenues. 69% behind forecast. Much of this is really the NDEA program, which Saco is not participating in fiscal year 2021. Reduced revenues offset by savings and salary. Again, MDEA, something else we'll be reporting a little bit differently once the grants policy is approved. Public Works revenues, this is mostly excise tax, 20% ahead of forecast. We had budgeted a very conservative excise for fiscal year 2021. The assumption was essentially that no one bought a new car during quarantine during the last quarter of fiscal year 2020, but people did buy new cars. So this is coming in a little bit ahead, and we'll probably adjust this item back up when we get to the fiscal year 2022 process. Real and personal property, $1 million ahead of forecast. Surplus revenues, this is likely due to the timing of lien filings. And I think it's hard to forecast how people are going to pay and when they're going to pay their tax bills. We do have 2 major due dates, but after that, it's a little bit, at the discretion of the taxpayer when they pay. So this is probably going to come back in line by the end of the year as well. Transfers and capital projects, $117,547 returned to the general fund as transfer revenue. It was budgeted under the transfer department, but booked under capital projects. That's related to some GASB reporting requirements. And that's everything that I have.
Thank you, Finance Director Salas. Just for clarification, it's not that we're not participating in the MDE program, right? It's just that we don't have enough officers because of our short staffing, and we don't have enough trained officers to participate in that program.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Thank you. Any questions for Finance Director Salas? Thank you, Finance Director Salas, for that presentation. Finance Director DiDonato.
Hi, good evening. We'll start with the month-to-date actuals. We should be at 50% budget to actuals since we're halfway through the fiscal school year. We're currently at 49.15%, roughly about 350,000 under budget. The difference between this month's projection and analysis versus what I provided last month, there's 2 main areas of that I'd like to discuss. One was we paid our debt service in full. So that was a large $300,000 payment. So as talked about before, it looked like we were about 1.2 million below budget, but I had stated that we had several large outstanding invoices that just had to be paid, and that's one of them. The second area to talk about is we had received the final MAT, which is the maximum allowable tuition for Thornton Academy. We had originally budgeted 2%. It came in at a historic low of one that I've never seen before, of 0.0308%. What that means is essentially it increased our per student cost by only about $4. Usually it's somewhere to the tune of $100 to $200. So that was a significant savings. I originally anticipated a deficit of about $300,000, and it turns out that we are now going to have an operating surplus of around 80, depending on what the final student enrollment will be for April. So that's good news. So instead of having a deficit to try to make up, we look like we'll be having a slight surplus to right around the same budgetary amount that we had designed for Thornton Academy. So what's that mean? We looking to be in fairly good shape for our expenses this year. We have several positions that we have not hired or filled. 3 of them were due to the anticipation of a shortfall or deficit with our regular ed tuition. So now knowing that we're on budget with a little bit of surplus, those 3 positions are going to come to help on our bottom line. As discussed earlier by Parker, the auditor, we have a significant deficit. We as a school board need to kind of figure out how we want to make that deficit up. I do anticipate this year of between our expenditures and our revenues of having a surplus somewhere to the tune of around 600 to 700,000. I'm hoping. We'll have obviously more in-depth analysis as the months go on and the expenditures come in. There are some potential large retirement payouts that we may have to do this year, so let me skew some of my numbers. But there's more to come on that as we continue. The next item that I have, let's kind of talk about the revenues. Nothing really has changed with the revenues. We are going to have a shortfall in our transportation fees, as discussed last month, of about 70,000. We don't have any trips, meaning we don't have any sports. We don't have any students attending and going to the Portman Museum. So we're not having to book our bus drivers and mileage to either PTO funds or Thornton Academy. So we are going to be short revenue in that area, but we're also not paying the drivers and those additional expenses and wear and tear and gas on the buses. So it's a wash. So you'll see we'll have a larger surplus in our transportation department, but we'll be losing out on some revenue in the transportation fees. Other than that, main care is still on target. We're still receiving steady deposits from our billing, and all of our other revenues seem to be on target. So it's good news for this year, which we're going to need to be able to help offset our deficit. The next handout I have, I know we're going to be talking about budget. I just wanted to provide in the packet. This is where the proposed superintendent's budget is. I don't know if Mayor, I don't know if you want me to go into this now, if we want to wait till after the discussion.
Finance Director DiDonato, you can continue
Okay.
and present the information, and I think it will only help further the discussion down the afterwards.
Great. So this is kind of kind of an overview of how the budget process has come to date. This is the superintendent's budget that has been put forth. What does the superintendent's budget entail? We have certain items in here that we have estimates on, one being health insurance. After discussion with the school board, we've put in 8% as our buffer. We do have a couple of cases that are of significant healthcare cases this year, so we wanted to make sure there's a large enough budget for the cost increase. We've budgeted Thornton Academy as well. I believe it was 2%, and we budgeted, I think, 25 students. I don't have it up in front of me, I'm sorry, but I can get that information. We have budgeted the increase in special ed for Thornton Academy special ed tuition. We had to increase our budget for this year, plus we put an additional 80,000 in as a buffer. Unfortunately, I did get correspondence with special ed last week from TTA that we have to increase an additional $460,000. We have several students going in from 8th grade into their 9th grade that they do not have the one-on-one capabilities, so they have to hire 6 additional ed techs for their department. So as you stay tuned during the budget process, if anybody's going to attend the Wednesday meeting, each one of our department heads are going to explain more in depth about their individual budgets and their needs. So that's a good time to kind of hear from each department. We do not have any new positions in here. We do not restore any of the positions that have not been hired. As talked about a few minutes ago, Saco Middle School has 2 positions that we did not hire due to trying to save additional funds to help off what we anticipated as a deficit. So those positions are not currently represented in the budget. So each department head or administrator will talk about what their needs are in the department going forward. So that's we're asking the admins to tell school board at that time. So again, everything in this budget that we have put forth is what most would call a zero-based budget increase with just contractual obligations. But just for that contractual obligations, it's 2.5 million of an increase. The next page kind of breaks down what the increase makes up. The MAT at 2.5% is 280,000 of that increase. We have a 27 student buffer for the MAT, that's 67,000. I explained the special ed increase. That does not represent the additional $468,000 that they are recommending that we add. Our health insurance increase of 8% is $330,000. We do have a computer lease that we had to put in here from technology. State of Maine has not committed that they will continue doing the one-on-one MacBook for our grades 6 through 8. And if that's the case, we will have to front the cost ourselves, which after talking with IT, it's an additional $180,000 a year for the lease program. But again, that's more information that Chris Stryker will go over. And then I did restore a couple of the before and after school program that was reduced. Knowing COVID was coming in, we didn't anticipate having any before or after school programming, as well as all of our contractual obligations for stipends and sports stipends need to be reinstated for next year, which is $185,000. So after you take those few items into consideration, our increases for salary as well as operational projects is just under 1.2 million. These are all items we'll discuss further detail on Wednesday, but I did want to kind of give you the update to where we have started the budget. This is what the superintendent is presenting to the school board to start discussing on Wednesday. We did have one piece of information that we've been waiting for that just came in. Today, we actually got the preliminary ED 279. The site had crashed all afternoon, and I was just able to finally view it about 6 o'clock this evening. The good news is we're receiving about 16.4 million in subsidy. That's about 2.5 million increase. So with this current budget expenditure listed in front of you and the additional subsidy that the state preliminary is going to be receiving, it's almost a wash. Obviously, we have other expenses that we need to talk about, other positions that may need to be restored, or changes that need to be done. But at least as of right now, it's some good news on our front. Where the additional subsidy came in was about a little over 2 million. They gave us a little additional 2 million in credit, I should say, for special ed, as well as the pre-K numbers for expansion is finally influencing our numbers for per student cost. What they do is they take a 2-year average. This year now is a second year with 100 students additional. So that increases our subsidy per child by about $300, which is good news for doctors. So all good things. We'll talk more in depth, but that's just kind of the heads up and where we are right now. Any questions on anything I've just said? I know I rumbled off quite a bit, but.
Finance Director DiDonato, thank you for that presentation. And just to recap, on page 279, you're talking about the superintendent's proposed budget that he will be presenting to the school board, and that is looking at a 2.5 roughly $1 million increase. And then you explain the $2.5 million increase on page 279. But what you're saying is due to some subsidy from the ED 279 funding formula from the state, a majority of that $2.5 million will be erased by the $2 million increase in subsidy.
That is correct. If I look, once I plug the numbers in, currently, as stated, with the documentation you have now, it's a $60,000 tax increase to the city of Saco.
Thank you for that. Councilor Berman had a question. Councilor Berman?
No, I was going to clarify what you just clarified. It seemed like the important issue was the ED 279 subsidy was coming in for about the same amount as the budget increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Any questions for Finance Director DiDonato? Jason, thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
At this point, we are at item 3, discussion between the council and school board. At this opportunity, it's time for the school board and city council to confer, and if they'd like, you've received 2 different presentations, and if any of you were on, which I think a majority of you were, you got to see the annual audit, which was an abundance of information on the city finances and where the city sits financially. So with that, I'll open the floor again, just so that we make certain if we can just raise our hands and so that we have some decorum as everybody talks or maybe doesn't talk. Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you. So basically, it looks like we've come through COVID fairly well on both sides. It's apparent that we need to keep dotting the I's and crossing the T's as we get closer into March and April with respect to later ED 279 numbers. If we're actually going to be responsible for the 6 FTE ed techs at TA and those kinds of things. But all in all, I'm very happy we're actually at the place we are. I'm still sensitive that, we may be coming up short and not sure where we're how far we'll be as we get into the last 3 months of the fiscal year, how we'll be ending up this year on both sides. The thing that we always need to keep in the back of our mind is everybody wants a new school, and thankfully DOE is hopefully moving that process along. But, as taxpayers, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that it's not a blank check and they're not going to pay for everything. So we may very well be coming out of having 70 to 80% of the cost of the school paid, but the taxpayers are going to fund the other 20%. And keeping the city side as high as possible for the bonding, as well as other municipal capital projects that are going to be coming forth in the next decade with respect to the water resource recovery facility and the upgrades it's going to need. Money is going to continue to be tight in the city, and we need to be very prudent in how we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Councilor Archer, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just because I have the school board here and it was brought up earlier by two of our citizens, when we get the ecology school report for next year, I don't feel the need to backdate by any means. Can we get a greater summary of that document? It was requested by two citizens today. Again, I believe it will come in the fall timeframe is when we get that report. Again, you have to you have to de-identify because of FERPA and things like that. But if you could break down how many students and from what schools, that would be great. It would meet the needs of the citizens that requested it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Superintendent DePatsy, do you believe that's achievable?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we'll work on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I guess I have a question for, I guess it'd probably be the superintendent. So you have in this preliminary budget a $908,000 increase in special ed. I recognize it's early in the process, but I'm just curious if there's any indication coming from the special ed department about potential increases in the future. I'm just speaking personally as a parent myself. I know that I would say that both my children have regressed from where they were last year. So I'm just assuming it's probably across the board, and if there's any concerns, that number will probably be much higher. Thank you.
Yeah, Nathan, that's a great question and comment. I think you're going to see a whole load of parents referring their children to special ed. I think, and I just got off the personnel committee and we were talking about it. I think the achievement gap and the opportunity gap for kids is going to be huge. I mean, I'm just even my kids, I've seen what it's done to them. Another thing that we'll talk about Wednesday, and probably Laurel and Jess will get into more in depth, the DOE also put down that children at when they turn, there's a law for special ed when they're 21, they can go up to 21 if they have certain functional disabilities. They've just added it to 22. So you can see that's probably some of those students that we're talking about that we have to add some ed text to, because the parents can keep them in for another year. So that's a whole other issue, plus the referral issue, plus, you know, just everything that's going on with COVID. So I'm concerned. And just for
Thank
all,
you. Yeah, I was. No, go ahead.
yeah, just for all kids in general. I mean, everyone.
Yeah, that's my concern, and I know you had mentioned that last spring, and having seen it firsthand with my own children, I can only imagine, you know, the kids out there that perhaps might not have parents that are as involved. So I just think we need to be cognizant of that, and be aware what's coming out of that special ed department. Are they currently testing now? I mean, I don't really know how it all works. So when they recognize there's a need, students are tested?
Yeah, so what we still have the referral process. Everything is kind of online now. So all IEPs are online and they're going nonstop. I mean, they're both directors are going nonstop with IEP meetings. The referral comes through. They still have all the same timelines we have to get to and do the testing. The testing is done. For example, the achievement testing, because we do some of it here because we use some COVID funds to help with achievement testing, and it's done with a glass, and they have to do it online with an iPad. It's definitely different. Testing takes a little bit more time, but we have all the referral information in the packet that we can go over Wednesday night, because both directors will review that.
Okay. And the other thing along that same lines, I'm just curious if there's any discussion at the state level or even here, you know, in the district. Obviously, with, you know, our children only going 2 days a week, it's not really what I would call sufficient for what they really need. Do you think there's going to be any opportunities throughout the summer, perhaps to catch up or whatnot?
Yeah, I think it would be great to have, and it's in our budget. We put in the summer program that we normally did. But I think we need to decide whether, because everything kind of was flipped over. We just haven't added any cost in there. My recommendation to this school board is to really beef that up. Typically, some parents didn't really take advantage of those summer programs. I think we might see a difference now. I think the biggest thing that this board is going to have to deal with is the parents that still want remote. We do have parents that want full-time, probably like yourself, but we still have parents that still don't feel safe. And so what we have to decide is, what are we going to have remote teachers? We've lost, I think the last total was 70 something homeschool students. So we lost that subsidy out of that. So are we going to do remote teaching next year? And if we do, how are we going to do that? I've got a couple plans that I will review with the school board. So those are all things to consider, as well as a huge extended year programming. And do we offer to anybody, and how we do it? And do we have the staff to do it? Because I think our staff is going to be burnt out by June. And a lot of them are still afraid to come into the schools. They coming in, but it's tough for them. I hope that helps. I don't know if that gives you kind of a global picture.
It does. I just, with the budget looking as promising as it does, speaking really as a parent now, I just think that, it's important that we kind of caution ourselves and not get wide-eyed going, oh, look, it looks good, because I think that there's probably potential for this to go up much higher.
Agreed.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Thank you, Superintendent DePatsy. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. Just piggybacking on some of those comments, is there likely to be additional professional development costs for teachers as we reintegrate students into in-person curriculum? And similar, are there going to be extracurricular expenses for the same reason, right? As students come back, are there going to be changes in that regard?
Our professional budget is pretty good, and most everyone's doing stuff online. So it's really, at this point, we've kind of moved to, instead of delivering professional development, what we think in central office is good for them, we really put it back to the teachers and their PLCs or their professional learning communities. So if they want something, they can definitely come back and ask for it. But yeah, I mean, if we go back full tilt with all students in, I think we really need to talk about mental health of students. We might need to look at social work services, because even though, like Nate and I were talking about the academic piece, the social emotional piece, or really what's happened to our kids, is going to be huge.
Thank you.
School Board Member Truman.
I had a quick question, and I was going to bring it up on Wednesday. What are we still getting around 3 in the COVID funds?
Yes. Good question, Sarah. Yeah, the new ESSER just came out today. Actually, it was 1 million. Oh, no, 1.1 million something. Jen, we just got it through today. So infrastructure, we'll be talking about that on Thursday. Mike has some ideas. It's based on air quality. Surprise, surprise. And for Nate, for your question, it is to do with the achievement gap. So we can use pieces of that money for a pretty robust summer program if we want to.
Okay, because I was going to ask if that was possible to use it for summer program.
Yes, we can.
Yep. Learning, if we can get, I don't know what that's like to hire someone to do just remote learning. So I know we have the RTI issue where those folks are off doing other things other than the RTI. So I wasn't sure if that was something that we can earmark it for.
Yeah, right now we don't have RTI really going on. We talked about that at length. Remember, we talked about what was legal and what was not legal and yada yada and all that stuff. Next year, we really need to have the RTI people back working with kids.
So I was curious though if we could use it, if there's any way, if not all the money's been earmarked, if we can somehow set some of that aside to hire a couple.
That's a good idea too, and you can do that. You just have to pay the federal tax for it. Remember, when we pay people out of the federal grant, you have to pay that 20% tax.
Okay.
Which eats away.
In the new ESSER grants too, I just want to jump in real quick about for paying for employees. The new ESSER grant gives us a lot longer of a time frame that we can use these funds. It actually allows us to pay into September of 2022. So yes, if we as a school board decides that we really want to push for individual, RTI work, or if we want to just pay a remote learners for that obviously has to be for a 1-year deal, which is going to be a little difficult to find some staff for that, but it allows us to pay them for their full year contract, which is very beneficial. And at this point, we haven't earmarked any of those ESSER funds at all. I know we'll talk about it in leadership for some ideas, but I think it's going to be really important going into next year's budget on how we're going to maintain those funds for personnel, for summer school work, for those additional achievement gaps that they're really looking for.
Yeah, I was also going to suggest that, because I know summer school is perfect because we can be outside more and not necessarily inside a building. So that could leave some opportunity for kids to have more time in front of their teacher to maybe try and fill in a little bit. I know summer's not very long here, but fill in some of that gap. So thank you.
Thank you, School Board Member Truman. Any further discussion? Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you. And I'm glad we have the school board here, because when you start listening to other mindsets and other directions, it kind of helps your brain flow. We were talking about the summer school as a possible option, expanding it. I know we've had it before. And again, I need some more direction. I need some more information from the city. But if there are concerns or limitations related to staff in the summer, is there a way to kind of build it into our summer programs at Park and Rec? The learning aspect. Is there a way to help identify, introduce maybe a play-based learning experience into our parks and recs or something like that? I would leave that to the school department, as that's your specialty, to see if that's even feasible. But when I heard summer school and there might be some barriers, is there a way to build in what we already have during the summer? Again, I'm not sure if we're offering our parks and rec as well. But when I heard School Board Member Truman mention, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. It was related to School Board Truman's thing. Sorry, it's been a long day. My apologies. He mentioned, Sarah, can you maybe?
I mentioned either using it for filling in where the RTI folks aren't. They're currently doing other things right now. So I was thinking of maybe doing more, hiring a couple of remote learners, remote learning teachers, or possibly having more teachers, you know, having larger stipends maybe for the summer to get more people incentivized to do the summer program.
Just food for thought, possibly, how can we bring in learning into the summer programs that already exist?
So starting in February, we'll be having joint meetings like this until June. So perhaps Director Summer can be at one of the future meetings and talk about if that's an opportunity that the city can help in the school department. Any further discussion between the
Mr. Mayor?
School Board Member LaFortune, and then we'll do School Board Member Tardif, School Board Member LaFortune.
Sure, just a quick logistical question, since the meeting on Wednesday has come up a couple of times. I'm just wondering if there is, if the ED 279 preliminary coming out today, the possibility of CRF3 funds and some of the other things we've discussed alters in any way the proposals that we received ahead of the meeting on Wednesday? In other words, are we going to get a second set of those proposals or variations on some of those proposals? Just from the standpoint of being able to prepare by reading those.
I can answer for the 279, the preliminary one. I think we're just like Alan talked about. I think we're in a good situation. It would depend on what you guys would like to do with when a director or principal reports out, whether they want to add a position, whether you want to do that or not. From our standpoint, that's the superintendent's budget. We're going to leave it as is. If you want to add those positions, you can. With the ESSER funds, I agree with Sarah. I think we need to really look at summer program and RTI program. And figure out how that will work, but that money goes away pretty quickly, and it can only be used for a year, and with a tax on it, it goes away. So I think we'll present those informations, and we'll have to decide what you like to do with the end budget for the board budget.
Right. My question is really more whether the new information has altered those proposals at all.
No.
Ahead of the Wednesday meeting.
So the only information change that I would just provide you is that in your budget book, I didn't actually provide you with a revenue sheet because I wasn't sure what the revenue was going to look like yet. So I would provide you the updated revenue sheet since now we have the ED 279, and I can send that out tomorrow, by noon time or so you can have that to review. I would suggest, I know special ed's going to talk about the increase in TA. They have had some conversations back and forth, but I would suggest that that be something the school board would have to consider increasing the budget to recognize those costs. But again, other than that, I do have food service and adult ed expenditure budgets that were not available to me at time of producing the book. Those are separate revenue, they're separate funds. So they don't affect the general fund, but local the adult ed does affect tax revenue. So that will be provided tomorrow afternoon as well.
Thank you for that information. School Board Member Tardif.
Mr. Mayor, if you remember last year, when we had one of these, I advised you and the council how bad a shape all of our school roofs are. And we've been patching them as far as 3 of them go, because we knew we were going to have money to build a new school, and we didn't want to waste money by putting new roofs on. However, middle school is going to be there. That's not going away. This winter, the first snow ice storm we had about $1,400 damage on the roof, and we had about $8,000 damage inside. And I think the council ought to seriously think about putting a certain amount of money away every year and start fixing that roof before it completely goes. Now, it'd be about $900,000 if you wanted to do the whole roof of middle school. However, if we had a small amount every year, we could start fixing it a piece at a time. And Mike said that's the only way to do it right now. Don't expect $1 million from the city to fix one school roof. But something would be better that we don't have to take out of our budget. And I think that the council and the mayor should be aware of that and start thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you, School Board Member Tardif. It's a great segue into a conversation that had started last year during budget time, but has never fully seen the light of day with regard to transitioning some of the maintenance duties to the city, whereas the buildings are city-owned properties, and maybe the city facilities department should be responsible for the building maintenance and so forth. That's a conversation that is still one that's ripe for both sides to discuss, and how that we move that forward.
Right.
Any other discussion? School Board Member Truman.
I'm just curious, because you said that the 279, was it the ED? Is that a lot?
I'm sorry, you're cutting out, Sarah.
Oh,
Good.
the ED 279 subsidy, is it usually a higher rate than what we got this year?
No, sometimes
Lower.
Lower. Yeah, it was yes. Historically we've been somewhere between the 12 and 13 million. We did get a bump the last 2 years, and we've been at just under 14. But yes, $6.3 million is a large increase for ED 279. My concern with that subsidy is it's not sustainable. I don't know if the state will be able to continue to have it at that. I do, based on the calculations, us having a higher per student cost and getting additional subsidy for those students makes complete sense. Now that we have the additional 100 students being not averaged half out of the year. But they have made a couple adjustments, understanding that they're throughout most of the state that there's been declining enrollment. They reduced the teacher ratio from the 1st to 5th grade to kind of help those numbers a little bit. They reduced it by 1 teacher. That gave us about $300,000 as far as expenditure cost realization. The formula is really difficult to kind of explain. Each page, there are certain things that help, and then by the end of it, it depends on what the state's mill rate comes in at and what the town evaluation is. They reduced their state mill rate by like 0.2, which is very rare. Usually it goes, the higher the mill rate goes up, the less subsidy they give us. So understanding whether or not this 16 million is sustainable, that's my only concern with budgeting for this year. Is it's great this year. I just worry that we lose subsidy in the years to come, and we have a budget that's already, at that subsidy rate. So
Right. Okay, so we got lucky this year.
very, very lucky. That's a large amount.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, in response to School Board Member Tardif's comments about school maintenance and your comments about future discussion, could you remind us about how the process works right now for significant maintenance to school buildings and where that would go in the budget?
That comes out of the school budget. Finance Director DiDonato, I'm not sure which line item, but I'm guessing that would come out of operations and maintenance, which is a $2.4 million line item in the budget.
Yeah, and I'll give you a little background on what that means so every year, currently that budget has about $125,000 in small miscellaneous projects. That's replacing carpets, replacing doors, fixing a roof repair in small sections. So it's under contracted services underneath the normal. And then the second piece to that is usually we have capital improvement account lines, which is a second segregated in that same department, but usually with the tune of like 150,000 or 200,000, because one of those projects is going to replacing a boiler for 60 grand or whatever it is. This year there is no capital improvements in there. We haven't had any capital improvements this year. We didn't have any current fiscal year. We don't have any in there for next year. Very rare are we able to push forward with large capital improvements, because when the time comes to reducing the budget, that's usually one of the first things that we look forward to doing. Now, the discussion of new school is starting to finally, feels like it's starting to roll a little bit. We'll have some more information on that. But as far as maintaining our buildings currently for any large projects, such as significant roof repair, we do not have any money in our budget representing any of that.
Is there a concern that over time that deferred maintenance might become increasingly expensive?
Every year. If you tell Mike Garrity will be the first one to tell you that we should have at least 1% of our budget as set aside for capital improvements and a standard, and I guess he called it in the normal standard realm. That's what we would invest. Schools are usually a little bit, maybe half that, but we don't have any. So he'd be the first one to tell you that it's a concern. They do a great job maintaining the buildings as is. We've used this COVID funds to help with our HVAC system, which has significantly improved it. But yeah, absolutely. The lack of investment on current structures is something that's going to happen. It's going to cost us more money in the long run, especially if a new school isn't built that combines a couple of the schools together.
Thank you.
Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to piggyback off of Councilor Berman. Is earlier this year, and I know COVID's got in the way, and don't get me wrong, I understand life's kind of strange in this environment. I brought up the idea that the city and the school, city's role should be as a landlord to our buildings that we own, and where the school department is the tenant. I brought this up as a way just to kind of clearly identify the role and just simplify it, in which a landlord will take care of the roofs, will take care of the buildings, will take care of the windows, things like that. Whereas the tenant would be responsible for changing the light bulbs, mopping the floors, things like that. I did bring it up a while ago, and I thought maybe that conversation should continue between the school and the city, just because, again, where we look at it, we own all the buildings. And my tenant at one of my properties, I mean, I'm not going to have them fix the roof. One, I don't want them to fix the roof because I have no clue who they're going to hire. I'm not worried about the school system, but just in this example, it's where the responsibility should lie. And the city has the funds to afford large projects like this, or prepare a lot easier, because we are the purse keeper of all funds, as we know. So I think that it should be shifted to more of a landlord relationship with the city, and move forward that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Archer.
Mr. Mayor,
School Board Member Tardif.
just answering Councilor Archer, when we have $125,000 put away to do odd things at schools, and we have to take 80,000, like we just did a month ago, because of damage done because of a roof, that the rest of it doesn't go very far to do things that we'd like to do.
Yes, School Board Member Tardif. If we were to do something like this, I would definitely like a clear roles and duties and responsibly written. For example, if you could have your roof fixed or the city covered the whole cost, would you sacrifice your $80,000 capital budget and you get the whole Saco Middle School roof?
Well, in a way, but then again, I might not, because that 80,000 we use when a rail might break at a school, and we take that money to fix the rail. We may not use it all during the year.
No, that's
We're
understandable. You would still have a maintenance budget, again, to fix railings, and it would all be clearly identified, the roles and responsibilities of who covers what. Boiler, that seems like large purchase capital item. That would be
no problem.
Things like that. So yeah, you would have a smaller budget, but you'd also have less responsibility of all your items.
Correct. But I'm saying now, the way it is, we just had $80,000 done damage, we take that out of that 125, it don't leave us much left for the rest of the year. And this is why I'm making the council and the mayor aware of it.
Yep. And again, this is a new model that's not being practiced. If we
Right.
were to go to that model, we'd have clear expectations, clear roles, clear responsibilities.
Right.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, just to follow up on one last comment, we have an opportunity now with a relatively strong budget and an unexpectedly high ED 279, while offsetting most of the superintendent's recommended budget, to maybe think about what the capital improvement budget is and items like roofs. Otherwise, it's going to be a near zero increase. So I just urge us to be thinking about those kinds of issues now in the current system through this budgetary process.
Yeah, and great. We have a committee coming on Thursday at 5 o'clock. It's infrastructure committee. Mike Aerie will be explaining all the projects that he has on his list over the next 5 years. And that's a great time to be present and listening to what he has to say, since he's that committee that kind of generally pushes the schools in that kind of direction.
Any further discussion between the school board and city council? All right, I don't see any hands up. No members seeking recognition. Moving on. Little redundant here, but item 4 is discussion on the FY 2021 budget. It doesn't, it appears we've already been discussing that. So the idea, if we go back to our previous meeting, the idea was to maybe provide some sort of guidance to the superintendent and the city administrator on both sides on what that number may be. But then if you remember, both sides kind of needed their own numbers because they're of their contractual obligations for different items. So maybe setting one number for both city and school is probably not feasible, but still having the conversation like we've had here tonight is, I think, beneficial and helpful as the process gets going. So if there's no further questions, discussions, comments, I think we're prepared to move on to the next item on the agenda. Okay. School board members, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Superintendent DePansy, thank you for joining us tonight. Finance Director DiDonato, thank you for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful evening. Feel free to stay on if you'd like, but we're going to start putting you back down into attendees from panelists as we move on to item C of the agenda, which is a budget process review. And that is page 280 of the packet. And I believe Finance Director Salas is going to lead us on that presentation in a couple of minutes.
Can the city council see the presentation?
We can see the presentation, but you may want to go to slide view so that it takes up the entire screen. There you go.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right. So we've just had an excellent presentation from the school on the preliminary superintendent's budget for 2022. The school board does start their process earlier than the city because the school final budget is part of the city budget that's presented in March. So that's why the school's sort of been working on this for several weeks already, and we're just kind of kicking off this process now. The idea with this presentation is to provide an overview of the process for the next couple of months, provide some context about what exactly the budget process entails, what we're going to cover. Some of this information is very familiar to those of you who've been through this process multiple times. But for those of you who are newer to the process or for the viewing public, I wanted to provide a presentation that very thoroughly covered some of the terminology and what's involved with this process, as well as providing a calendar for the next couple of months. Okay. So first of all, just an introduction to the budget. What is a municipal budget? Basically, the municipal budget is all the expenses and revenues that the city of Saco needs to provide quality services for its citizens for a full year. That includes the portion of the school budget that the school cannot fund from other revenue sources and therefore must be raised from the municipal tax rate. What is a fiscal year? The city's fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th. The year in fiscal year refers to the year of the last day of the year. So for example, fiscal year 2021, that goes from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. Fiscal year 2022, which we'll be budgeting for, will be from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. What is the property tax rate? So the property tax rate is the city's primary mechanism for raising funds on an annual basis. The city calculates the amount of taxes owed by each citizen by multiplying the tax rate times the property value that individual owns. The property tax rate does have three components. The county tax, which is based on the amount that the county obligates us to levy. The school tax, which is based on the appropriation, again, the amount of the school budget that needs to be raised from local taxes. And then the municipal budget, which is municipal expenses minus any other non-tax revenues. What is the mill rate? So the property tax rate, sometimes referred to as the mill rate. That can be a bit confusing for people that aren't familiar with the terminology. The mill rate is the property tax rate per $1,000 of property value. So that's where the mill comes, right, for 1,000. In fiscal year 2021, the mill rate was 19.67. So take 19.67, multiply it times each $1,000 of property value, and that's the amount that each citizen owes. Are there any questions? I know, again, this might be some basic terminology, but wanted to make sure everyone feels comfortable going into the next couple of slides. All right. So what are the phases of the budget? So now I'm going to go through, and this kind of gives you some behind the scenes information about how the city will be developing the budget over the next couple of weeks, as well as, again, defining some of the terminology that we use. So the first phase of budget development is defining the maintenance of effort budget. So for this phase, the city administrator, so Brian and myself, work with departments to establish the maintenance of effort budget. What does a maintenance of effort mean? It means doing the same thing this year that we did last year. Doing the same thing may cost a little more. Why? There are cost of living increases. We may have union contracts that we have to fulfill. There could be some inflation cost pressures. All of these things can cause the budget to increase, even though we're only doing the same thing that we did the year prior. On the other hand, you might save a little bit of money because the maintenance of effort budget will exclude any one-time expenses or one-time initiatives from the prior year. So in summary, the maintenance of effort budget equals last year's budget plus contracted increases plus cost of living increases minus one-time expenses. The maintenance of effort budget gives council visibility into exactly how much it would cost to do the same thing this year that we did last year. Any questions on this piece of it? So the expectation for our department heads is that they develop a budget that fits within maintenance of effort. In other words, department heads are given line item control over their budget. They can move around budget between different line items, but the total amount of budget that they put together needs to fit within the maintenance of effort budget that's distributed by finance to the departments. The second phase is the city administrator's budget. So departments present their budget in two pieces. The first piece, like I said, is this maintenance of effort budget. They have to fit within the budget that we give them. And then the second piece is the department may want to expand services or increase department size. Increases can be due to increased regulation. They can be due to expansion of demand for services because of population growth. It could be in response to requests from council. Perhaps there's some services that you would like to see offered to our citizens that we don't do currently. The city administrator reviews these requests and determines its final budget. So the maintenance of effort budget plus approved increases equals the city administrator's budget. It is theoretically possible the city administrator might want to also make some tweaks or cuts to the submitted maintenance of effort budget, but most likely it's just going to be some expansion of services that gets added to that maintenance of effort budget. Phase 3 is the budget presentation. So once we've arrived at the final city administrator's budget, the finance department will compile the budget book. The budget book is distributed both in digital and PDF format. The city administrator and the finance director also work together to create a budget presentation. The budget presentation will outline some of the overriding factors that went into developing the budget, detail some of the pressures on maintenance of effort, detail some of the increases. And at that same budget presentation, the school superintendent and the school finance director will be presenting the final school budget as approved by the school board. Phase 4 is budget deliberation. So during budget deliberation, you'll have the opportunity to hear from individual departments in the city about their individual budgets, what went into them, some of the things that have happened over the year. This is sometimes the only opportunity for a department to present the great work that they're doing. So it's an opportunity for the city council to get an inside view of what's going on with city departments, as well as an opportunity to ask specific questions about what you may see in the budget book. The public can also participate in the process. They can view the presentations, obviously, whatever platform, whether it be Zoom or in person. Public comment is, of course, allowed at the start of every meeting, like any other council meeting. And then there's also a formal public hearing on the budget near the end of the process where the public can voice any concerns or recommendations. During the budget deliberation, the council can also work with finance to draft amendments. So you as the council are given line item control over the budget per the city charter. That can feel a little intimidating because there is over 1,000 line items in the city's annual budget, but I'm always available, or Brian's available, to work with you in crafting amendments, and those amendments can be reductions in the budget, they can be increases in the budget. That's the authority that the council has. The final phase is budget approval. So there's a dress rehearsal for this. That's usually the first Monday in May, and then the second Monday in May is when the charter mandates that the council vote on the budget. As part of the budget approval process, council will review and vote on the fee schedule. You will review and vote on the capital plan. So we talked a little bit about capital planning this evening. The city does present a formal capital plan going out 5 years. The council will review and vote on the school budget. You are authorized to increase or decrease the school budget, but you are limited to cost centers. And in the budget that Jason presents to the city council, you'll see what those cost centers are. The council reviews and votes on the municipal budget. Again, amendments may be proposed and approved by line item. That creates transparency and a clean trace on any changes made to the budget. Then upon approval, finance enters the final budget into our financial system and compiles the final approved budget book. Unlike in the private sector where, budget is a good idea and this is what we're hoping for, the municipal approved budget actually carries the weight of law. And that's why there is so much reporting around how the city has performed versus its budget, both on an ongoing basis throughout the year and in the final audited. So again, this is just a recap of the budget process. The maintenance of effort budget is established by the finance department. Proposed increases are reviewed in meetings with the city administrator, and the city administrator's budget is finalized. The budget is presented to council formally in March. Council reviews the budget through departmental presentations, public comment, etc., and then council approves the final budget. Is there any questions about the budget processes I've outlined before I move on to some specific dates? So here's the timeline, what we're looking at over the next couple of months. So tonight is that budget process refresher to council. Supported entities obviously welcome to view this presentation, but we will be communicating with them directly later on in the week about the process. Sometime in February, this is a tentative date, February 22nd, it could move around, is the joint mid-year fiscal update for council. That's also mandated in the charter, and that'll be another joint meeting between the school and the city. February 26th, that's when supported entity requests are due. Those can be sent to me directly. March 22nd, that's the school and city together presenting the budget to council. March 29th and Mondays in April are departmental presentations. April is also ideally the time when perhaps I'll have the opportunity to work with one or more of you on some requests and changes to the budget, getting specific line items and other information. The joint school board and city workshop, there is a meeting. Typically, it's a school board meeting that the city council attends. So Wednesday in April, just to talk more in detail about the approved school budget. 4/29 is when, or April 29th is when we have planned to have the public hearing, the formal public hearing on the budget. May 3rd is sort of our dress rehearsal for the budget. Council will have the opportunity to review all of the motions that will be presented on the final budget approval night and ask any questions. There's also opportunity to ask any questions of the school board and work with Jason to prepare amendments if that's something of interest to the council by cost center. And then May 5th or May 10th, I apologize, is the final budget approval by council. Any questions on these dates? Okay, that's everything that I had.
Finance Director Salas, thank you for that presentation. Again, that's an overview of the budget process that that's basically started tonight, and we'll work through until we get to a final budget in May. Any questions for Glennis at this time? Seeing no questions, Glennis, as always, thank you for the presentation and thank you for your availability to help during the process. With that, we move on to item D of the agenda, and that is a public hearing on the transit-oriented omnibus TIF district, and that is Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. The background in this, over the past several months, the Planning and Economic Development department has been working to develop a transit-oriented omnibus tax increment financing district. Establishing this new TIF district in the city has been under consideration by the EDC and City Council. As the 9 active TIF districts across the city have demonstrated for many years, these TIF districts enable more of our tax dollars to remain in Saco. The city's TIF districts have funded and promoted economic development initiatives, public infrastructure improvements, bond payments, and many other projects. Staff presented the proposed concept for the transit-oriented TIF district to the City Council on November 30th, 2020. The council was supportive and requested that parcels along the Camp Ellis trolley route be added to the district. These parcels have been added to the district, and on December 14th, 2020, the EDC unanimously voted to recommend to the City Council approval of the transit-oriented omnibus municipal development and tax increment financing district. and Development Program in substantially the form presented here too. On January 4th, 2021, the City Council approved the first reading and scheduled a public hearing for tonight, January 25th, 2021. I move to open the public hearing relating to the order regarding the transit-oriented Omnibus Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District, waiving the reading thereof and entering into the minutes as if read.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on opening the public hearing. A roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing at 9:07 p.m. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9 from a cellular phone, and you'll be unmuted to speak to the council. Seeing no hands raised and nobody seeking recognition, Councilor Purdy, back to you.
I move to close the public hearing and further move to schedule the final reading of the order regarding the transit-oriented Omnibus Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District on February 1st, 2021.
Second.
Motion to close the public hearing has been made by Councilor Purdy, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on closing the public hearing and setting the next meeting for February 1st. Councilor Minthorn?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that, I don't remember the page number right now, but it's back in the charts. Let's see, page 5, which is our page 295. I submitted edits to Denise Clavette through the city administrator to edit Shuttle Bus Zoom into the Biddeford, Saco, Old Orchard Beach Transit Committee, or whatever our new legal name is, or the old Tri-Community Transit Committee, and use that verbiage as Shuttle Bus Zoom is potentially going away in the next 6 months to a year as a branded name for the service. So just wanted everyone to be aware of that.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
A motion passes 7-0 at 9:10 p.m. That brings us to item E on the agenda, which is a public hearing, a renewal application for special entertainment permit, Saco Eagles, Aerie, number 3792. Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mayor. Saco Eagles Aerie 3792 has applied for renewal of their special entertainment permit. The permit will be concurrent with the establishment's liquor license. The applicant has paid all applicable permit fees, and the clerk has properly advertised the public hearing in accordance with the Saco City Code, Chapter 93, Entertainment, Section 93-2. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn to open a public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Discussion on opening the public hearing. Roll call vote. Councilor Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
Yes.
Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
Yes.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing at 9:12 PM. If there's anybody wishing to speak to the council on this matter, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9, and you'll be unmuted to speak to the council. Seeing no hands raised and nobody seeking recognition, back to you, Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you. I move to close the public hearing and be it ordered that the city council grant the renewal application submitted by Saco Eagles number 3792 for a special entertainment permit to be concurrent with the establishment's current liquor license. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn, second by Councilor Berman. Discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
Yes.
Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
Yes.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item F of the agenda. It's a first reading for TIF additional expense review for Route 1 sewer extension. Councilor Purdy.
The Economic Development Commission reviewed a request from the Water Resource Recovery Department for funding to complete Phase 2 of the Route 1 sewer extension project at its January 11th, 2021 meeting. The Water Resource Recovery Department requested the EDC's consideration of up to $300,000 from TIF funds to support the Phase 2 construction of the extension of the sewer along Route 1. This phase will bring sewer service from the Cascade Road to the southerly entrance of Aquabogan's property. The staff team of Howard Carter, WRRD Director, Emily Cole Prescott, Industrial Compliance Manager for WRRD, Patrick Fox, Department of Public Works Director, and Joseph Leverrier, City Engineer, were present for this discussion and provided design plans for the commission to review. Those are in the packet, see Exhibit 1. This phase is estimated to cost $1,150,000. During 2017, the city referendum approved $2 million for the extension of sewer along Route 1 corridor north of Cascade. In 2019, the city completed the first phase of sewer extension work that was funded entirely through the bond. The remaining bond funds available for this phase of the sewer extension are $888,361, which results in a funding deficit of $261,639 based upon the total project cost estimate of $1,150,000. The Planning and Economic Development Department recommended that the commission utilize funds from the Park North TIF district to cover the funding deficit for this item. It was recommended by the staff team to coordinate this with other projects that the city will be pursuing Route 1 in the next year, i.e. water company infrastructure expansion, sidewalks, etc., to maximize construction season and not close off Route 1 for multiple construction seasons. The following motion was made at the EDC's January 11th, 2021 meeting and approved unanimously. Stephen Dupree's move to allocate up to $300,000 or maximum funding available from the Park North TIF District to support a prorated portion of the Phase 2 construction of Route 1 sewer extension. Andrew Goldberg seconded, and the motion carried unanimously. I move to hold the first reading and schedule the second and final reading and vote for February 1st, 2021 to approve and allocate funding of up to $300,000 or maximum funding available from the Park North TIF District to support a prorated portion of the Phase 2 construction of the Route 1 sewer extension.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion? And just so everyone's aware, we do have WRRD Director Howard Carter and Planning and Economic Development Director Denise Clavette here to answer any questions should the council have any. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I mean, overall, I just say I support this. I mean, we set out several years ago now to build out this sewer, and obviously didn't have enough funding at that point. So I think this is a good use of the funds. But my only question would be is format here. Is this a budget amendment? Because if so, it should be presented as a budget amendment when it comes before us again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor Archer.
Yes, mine's just more about the wording of the motion. I'm interested in this project moving forward. When we say, again, up to 300,000 is great, but when we put maximum funding available, what I would be afraid of, and again, I don't think I'm concerned here. It's more about the motion itself, is if all of a sudden we only have 250 grand in the account, we are literally authorizing that account to go to zero. We probably don't want to tie our hands if necessary, so I would just stricken the what is it called, or maximum available, maximum funding available, just so we're not put in a position we don't want to be in. But up to 300,000 covers it in reality.
Are you making a motion to amend the suggested motion and remove the word "or maximum funding available"?
Yeah, well, I might as well do it now. I was just going to have staff do it since this was the first reading. But if we want to make it formal, I make a motion to remove the "or maximum funding available" from the motion.
Councilor Archer has made a motion to remove the wording "or maximum funding available" from the suggested motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilor McPhail, on the motion, or excuse me, on the amendment only. On the amendment only, discussion on the amendment only. Councilor Johnston.
It goes back to my prior question. Is this a budget amendment? Because we should be following that format if this is a budget amendment.
From what I understand from Gwyneth and Brian, this isn't even really required to vote. I thought this was going to be more of an informational item. Brian should weigh in on that. So.
He should, because that's actually where I was going with this. But
this I was just going to say, so this was a topic we had a conversation among with staff. I haven't been through this exact process since I've been here, so I was asking what was the sort of customary practice here. And I was told this is not a budget amendment. This didn't really have to come to council. It was already approved by EDC. I thought having it come to council would just add another layer of transparency to it and have you guys, be on board with it. But long and short, this is, according to our finance director and past practice, not a budget amendment.
Councilor Berman, then Councilor Purdy. Councilor Berman.
I'm concerned about the amendment to remove the language about maximum available amount. In case the account were to fall short, we would be approving overspending or transferring too much. The maximum allowable amount sets a cap at what can be transferred, not a minimum. I think the word should remain.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. Along the same lines, and perhaps Director Clavette could back me up on this. I believe during the EDC's meeting that the reason those words were put in was because there might not be at some point $300,000 in that account. So we didn't, I think the wording was put in there to avoid overdrawing the account.
That's correct.
Thank you, Councilor Purdy. Director Clavette, you've agreed that that's the reason why the EDC put in there. Thank you for that. Councilor Archer.
So then in that case, grammatically, it's a duplicative to say up to, and then also say or maximum funding available. It's effectively duplicative.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. On the amendment only. Any further discussion on the amendment only? Seeing no further discussion on the amendment only, roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
No.
Councilor Gunn.
No.
Councilor Berman.
No.
Councilor Minthorn.
No.
Councilor McPhail.
Based on that piece of information, no.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
The amendment fails. Back to the main motion. Discussion on the main motion. Seeing no hands raised and no counselor seeking recognition on the main motion, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
If it's staff's opinion, my vote is not needed, then I abstain.
Councilor Johnston has abstained. Motion passes 6-0. Moving on to item G, this is one reading on dissolving the ZORS committee. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. On October 15th, 2018, the City Council voted to authorize the creation of an ad hoc zoning ordinance revision steering committee. The goal of this group was to update the zoning ordinance to align with the City of Saco's land use vision. The most forward-thinking land use policies in the state of Maine that ensures financial stability, environmental sustainability, and provides opportunities and accessibilities to all. The committee consisted of 11 members who worked tirelessly, meeting often to navigate the process and finding solutions that would work best for the city. After over 2 years of the committee's work, the amendments to the zoning ordinance, zoning map, site plan review ordinance, and subdivision ordinance are now in the hands of the planning board and the city council. The city council and Mayor Doyle thanks this group of volunteers for the time, dedication, and hard work that they committed to this project. This committee has fulfilled its duties and will now be dissolved. I move that the Saco City Council dissolve the ad hoc zoning ordinance revision steering committee, as this committee has faithfully fulfilled its duties.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. I just want to, before we get into discussion, I do just want to thank all the folks that did a lot of good and hard work on the ZOR steering committee. And those folks included Council Liaison Nathan Johnston, Economic Development Chair in Saco Main Street, Board Member Betty Brunswick, Planning Board Chair at the time Neil Schuster, Planning Board Member Matt Prevenkel, Historic Preservation Committee Member Kelly Archer, Community Leader Tim Leary, Assessment Review Board Member Barbara Dresser, Saco Main Street Board Member Peg Poulin, and Saco Parent Steve Hewitt. Again, thank you to all those folks that did a lot of good and hard work on behalf of the city of Saco. And now I open it up to council discussion on dissolving the ZORS committee. Hearing no discussion or roll call vote on the matter, and that is Council Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
Yes.
Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
Yes.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item H, one reading on the Ecology School Contract Zone MOA, and that is Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The contract zone approved for the Ecology School on February 1st, 2016 and amended on January 29th, 2018 allows the school to be established and to operate in the C1 zone, specifically at 184 Simpson Road. A condition of the contract zone requires that TES either provide Saco City Schools with educational program valued at $40,000 or pay a direct fee payment of $20,000 every year. The COVID-19 pandemic has placed constraints on in-person ecology programming, and the fee would cause the ecology school a large financial burden during the pandemic. The city of Saco wishes to enter into a memo of agreement with the ecology school in which TES would offer additional program over 8 years to compensate for the program that was missed during COVID-19. Be it ordered, the city council authorized the city administrator, Brian Kenrath, to enter into a memo of agreement with the ecology school regarding COVID-19 related hardships.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Archer, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion. See a couple of hands up. Councilor Johnston, then Councilor Archer. Councilor Johnston.
Well, the first point of order I'd like to make is that this item was tabled on 2/7/20, so we probably should have untabled it to continue that discussion. Otherwise, we still have this lying on a table somewhere, so perhaps we should do that.
Councilor Johnston, thank you for your point of order. It's not necessary. I've checked with city solicitor. We're not taking up the same matter. We're taking up a memorandum or agreement by and between the two parties, which is not a direct waiver and not the item that was tabled. So that is why we're putting it forward in this fashion. Thank you very much for the point of order, though. Councilor Archer.
I wasn't done.
Oh, I'll come back, Councilor Johnston. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Councilor Archer.
I will agree with that interpretation as well, because it is a different matter. Just wanted to say that I do believe that this, yes, we were supposed to be getting, and they did not meet the demands of the contract. However, I do believe that this memorandum of understanding is a fair and balanced to both parties, the city, and I am in support of this, recognizing its commitment to the contract, us upholding the contract, and still recognizing what COVID has done to our community.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Back to Councilor Johnston. My apologies that I cut you off.
Thank you. Okay, well, I appreciate our city solicitor's opinion. The concern I had was that I had made an amendment at that meeting that was essentially a memorandum of understanding. It wasn't an outright waiver, which is kind of what we have here now, where we're not waiving it. Regardless, I support this. I mean, it's essentially what I was looking to do back in December. I think it's fair. I hope the rest of council sees it that way. Though I do have, I guess, some comments related but somewhat unrelated, and it more goes to comments I've made before about compliance and reporting with contract zones and TIFs. And I think that this is a good opportunity to speak to that, because again, we've had these, not just this contract zone, but other ones where certain reporting was supposed to occur, and what we're presented with, and I understand this isn't pointing fingers at staff or anybody else. We just really weren't clear with what we wanted for reporting. So I think that the way that TES has reported and the school department has reported participation in the program has probably been a problem from the outset, because it really wasn't clear as to what we were looking for. And, you know, we all received the notification tonight from Mrs. Brown. So, I mean, I think her points are well taken in that, that going forward, we need to have better reporting. I mean, there's another thing that I had put into that contract zone back in 2017, 2018, which required 51% of the construction to be Maine-based. And I assume that it has been, but there's never been any reporting as to such. So it's just making note and point going forward that this contract zone and others that have similar requirements, we need to review probably annually is what I'd like. This time of year is always good because it's the start of the new year. So, perhaps going forward, we could review some of these, and if there's clarity that's needed for staff to understand what it is we're looking for, then we should do that so that we have a more complete understanding. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor Berman.
Thank you. I'm also generally in favor of this solution. I do have two questions. One, has the ecology school agreed that they can provide this additional programming? And two, do we know whether the schools and or the Parks and Rec department can absorb this programming?
Councilor Berman, they did provide from some of the previous documentation you may not have received, as you may not have been on council at the time, but there was previous documentation that showed that one year they did go over the $40,000 in programming. So it is achievable. Whether it's achievable this year, that is something that is still unanswered at this moment in time. But that is still an outstanding question. But they have gone over the $40,000 mark, and according to their reporting and the school's reporting, and that's the measure of which we've been using as the benchmark since the inception of the agreement. So,
yeah, I guess the nature of my question is whether the ecology school has another $5,000 worth of curriculum and or programming, and or are there school classrooms that can make use of additional field trips or whatever services they offer in order to achieve that extra $5,000? And I hear your answer is it's been done once before, so that maybe the answer is yes.
So at this moment, if there's no objection, I'd like to bring on the executive director, Drew Dumsch, to maybe answer some of the curriculum questions that you may have. But the idea to add in the Saco Parks and Rec portion was to post-COVID, maybe that Parks and Rec could be utilized if there's a parks program that goes up, that some of that additional programming could be done through Parks and Rec and through some other avenues. But let me bring forth, if there's no objection, Executive Director Dumsch to answer some of those questions. Executive Director Dumsch, thank you for joining us this evening. I know you've been listening prior to being promoted to a panelist here for discussion. And the question was,
hello, Mayor Doyle.
Drew, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm just interconnection, so I'm just turning off video.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to thank City Administrator Canrith. We had a lot of discussion as a follow-up to your discussions on this matter. I think the Ecology School is very happy with the MOA. In fact, adding in the Parks and Rec, I think, is a benefit. In fact, I listened with great interest earlier on with Councilor Johnson's concern about learning loss and the discussion with Superintendent Patsy in that there might even be some opportunities to work both with Saco schools and Parks and Rec in the summer on summer programming. Also, as we move to a full-scale production farm, the ability to provide produce to the Saco schools. I mean, there's a large ability to work with both Saco schools and Saco Parks and Rec. And the ecology school, we're totally open to any kind of reasonable reporting. And just internally, the work we've done with Denise Clavette and Brian and Julie Smythe and Superintendent DePatsy has been very thorough. So I think there's been maybe a gap in that, having a handful of citizens continue to be concerned with what the actual delivery to the Saco schools is, because there's no question in terms of Saco staff and Saco schools that they're getting value. So I think the disconnect is our ability to help the Saco Council and any concerned citizens to realize the value that is being derived and has been over the past couple of years under the contract zone.
Thank you, Drew. Councilor Berman, does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Johnston, you had your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Oh, yes, but it's not for Drew.
Okay.
It's just, so if we're done with him, then I could ask my questions.
Okay. Any further questions for Executive Director Dumsch? Drew, thank you for joining us. Any last comments for the council?
No, thank you again. I look forward to when our campus opens later on this year, that we'll be able to work with the city of Saco, both through Saco schools and Saco Parks and Rec, to be a benefit to the community. Thank you.
Drew, one of the questions before you trail off, one of the questions that was posed here earlier by Councilor Johnston was, part of the contract zone required so much building material come from the state of Maine. Can you update us on that portion?
We sure can. And actually, at one point that was updated with the planning office, but we're happy to do that again. I mean, we have predominantly, it is amazing. I mean, Saco Construction is Maine, all our designers and engineers are Maine, and the predominance, in fact, a huge part of all the building materials are Maine white pine provided by Hancock Lumber in their own forests that are Maine forests. So I think we're proud at the this is really a Maine Represents project, and I think the city of Saco has every right to be proud to have this organization do that much kind of Maine business and ingenuity within the city limits.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you again for joining us and answering some of those questions.
Thank you all. Take care.
Councilor Johnston, did you have a question?
Yep. Thank you. So I assume that Mr. Murphy or Attorney Murphy prepared this document. So I would assume that when he did his review, it was his opinion that this did not require an amendment to the CZA to have this as part of that contract.
That's correct.
Okay. And then just procedurally speaking, we still have an item on the table, so we probably should bring that back up at a later date and dispose of it, because we can't just leave something in perpetuity on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Any further discussion on the memorandum of agreement with the Ecology School and the City of Saco? Seeing no hands raised and no counselor seeking recognition, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone. At the moment, before we move on, it is 9:30, or it is past 9:30. We are past the item, the hour to take up new business. We do have administrative update and council discussion and comment. The new business items are not time sensitive, and therefore at this time, if there's a motion to entertain moving forward, I'll entertain the motion. If not, we will dispense with new business and move forward to the administrative update. Hearing no motion to move forward, we are going to suspend the new business item and move to administrative update. City Administrator Canrath, do you have an update for the council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Quick update on the senior meals program. A reminder that February 12th at the community center will be our next senior meals program. Meal will be provided by Saco's Deli and Company, and there will be future dates in March and April that are being finalized for additional events. Mary's Walk, the 23rd annual Mary's Walk and Carryman Pub 5K will be held again this year virtually on March 21st, 2021. I want to announce the city's wellness program. We'll be covering the registration fee for the first 20 city employees who choose to participate and register for the event. As many of you know, Mary's Walk is a big event in town and has become one of Saco's biggest community events, having raised over $300,000 and had 3,500 participants in previous years. So encouraging all to participate virtually and encouraging city staff to participate as well. And again, the first 20 will have their registration fee covered by our wellness program. Some of you may have heard some information or some rumor about the Ross Ridge ice rink that went up. The city is currently working with a number of homeowners down there to put together an agreement that would allow them to leave this rink up on the Saco Parks and Rec maintained field in the neighborhood. The homeowners who erected the rink will be responsible for the cleanup and the spring maintenance of the grass. This agreement is currently being drafted by our city attorney after meetings with the interested parties. It will also address any possible penalties for non-compliance, failure to clean it up, or non-payment. So we're looking forward to getting that together and working that out. And having the kids in that neighborhood and all city residents be able to use that rink. But in addition, our Foss Road rink is also now open for all resident use. Just an update on state revenue sharing. Governor Mills recently released her two-year biennial budget, which includes $144 million in municipal revenue sharing for fiscal year 22 and $151 million for fiscal year 23, and this is an increase from the fiscal year 21 number of 138 million. So that's good news for municipalities all across the state. Finally, I would just like to announce that the Arts Commission will be getting together sometime very soon for an organizational meeting. Jessa Berna in our Economic Development Department is our staff liaison to that committee, and then we'll be setting up a time for an organizational meeting as well as taking on any initial business that's been forward to them. So that committee or commission will be getting going in the very near future. So thank you. All I have. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, City Administrator Canrath. Any questions for the City Administrator? Hearing no questions, moving on to item 12, council discussion and comment. Hearing no discussion and comment, there's no executive session tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Councilor Minthorn? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Discussion on the motion to adjourn. Roll call vote on the motion to adjourn. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adjourn the meeting at 9:46 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone, for your comments tonight and for your work tonight. Be well and stay safe.